Chapter 1667, Banquet. Chapter 1667, Banquet. With Ling Han's speed, returning to Joint Peace Planet really did not need too much time. After advancing into the Great Saint tier, the limits of his cultivation level continued to be unlocked. He had gained a breakthrough improvement in the lightning flash. Though his speed had not increased, the time that he could continuously use it had been extended considerably. At first, he had estimated he would arrive in about a year's time, but in truth, he had only taken 9 months' time because he had used lightning flash in the journey to speed himself up, which saved him as much as 3 months' time. After returning to the Great Ling Empire, Ling Han did not make a great fanfare of it, but when Feng Po-yun and the others knew that he had become a saint, they were still incredibly surprised and pleased, and were determined to throw a celebration for him. When the news spread out, the elites from the surrounding great stars all arrived personally. Firstly, to see it with their own eyes, and secondly, they did not dare be absent. A saint had succeeded Dao, and you actually did not come to offer your congratulations? Were you looking down on the saint? This feast naturally needed some time to prepare, and Ling Han began his work of moving people. Those by his side naturally entered into the Black Tower, but it was impossible that Ling Han would be so trusting of every single person, and allow the Black Tower to become public knowledge. He began to forge spatial god tools, and when the time came, he would only have to place people inside, and he would be able to bring a few more people with him. Moreover, he had no plans of bringing too many people into the celestial realm. Firstly, everyone was far from touching the ceiling to their cultivation, and it was completely fine for them to stay in the ancient realm first and reach the heavenly body tier, eternal river tier, and Genesis tier. Secondly, he had no foundations at all in the celestial realm. If he brought a lot of people with him, what kind of arrangements should he make for them? And in future, after he advanced into the severing mundane tier, he would be able to freely travel to and fro between the celestial realm and ancient realm. He just had to be faster to avoid the fate of having his lifespan severed. 5 days later, the elites from the chaotic star's majestic empire were the first to arrive. There were the left and right ministers and the great generals. In this galaxy, they were elites that stood at the apex, but in front of the present Ling Han, they did not even dare to stand up straight. Saint, that was the true dragon from the 9 heavens. The left minister was also rueful. In the past, he had even warned Ling Han to keep his distance from his youngest daughter, and thought that Ling Han was unworthy to associate with her, but now, if he had known that Ling Han would become a saint, how could he have possibly objected? Who knew, he might already be the father-in-law of a saint by now. Sigh. However, Li Weiwei and Ling Han's relations were still amicable. In truth, the two of them only had a very pure friendship. It was only the left minister himself who had a misconception. This girl was very carefree, and the moment she spotted him, she shouted, "Ling Han! Ling Han! Girl!" The left minister's face had turned green from shock, and hurriedly pulled his daughter back. "That is a saint, you have to respectfully pay your greetings." Li Weiwei gave a small pout. She thought that there was not much that had changed in Ling Han as compared to the past, so why did she suddenly have to pay her greetings now? She did not dare disobey her father, primarily because the left minister's present expression was too pitiful. If she dared call out Ling Han again, her old father would probably pass out from the extreme anxiety. She gave a slight curtsy, about to bow, yet Ling Han had already reached her, and stretched out his hands into the air. A force immediately stopped her from continuing to bow. Ling Han smiled, and asked, "What need is there for you to be so reserved with me?" "That's right." Li Weiwei had not wanted to bow in the first place, and immediately went along with the flow. "Little Han, you are very incredible now." Ling Han laughed. "That's right, who do you think I am?" In front of friends, he did not mind a little teasing. Ji Yuna also came, pursing her lips in a smile at the sidelines. In the past, among the 3 great beauties of the imperial capital, only she and Li Weiwei had not married, and their presence here also caught the attention of others, especially because they had a connection with Ling Han, which caused a considerable number of forces to have some ideas. If they could marry these 2 women, then wouldn't they have boarded Ling Han's great ship? Of course, it was not everyone that dared have such thoughts, fearing that Ling Han had some relationship with the 2 women that they were unaware of. What if they were lovers? Then they really would be seeking their own deaths. Half a month later, the elites from the other great stars also gradually arrived, and another half-month later, the great banquet officially began. Ling Han sat high up on the throne, while there were masses beneath. There were as many as hundreds of thousands of people, and everywhere he looked, there were heads. Meanwhile, seated at his side were his two brothers, Feng Po Yun and Murong Qing, and his uncle, Yu Shan, and cousin, Yu Kaiyu, were seated on the other. The two of them were the most shocked. Previously, Ling Han had united the whole lower realm, and even opened the sky and entered into the immortal realm. This was already unfathomable to them, but they had never imagined that Ling Han would be invincible even in the immortal realm by now, and was about to enter into the celestial realm. Celestial realm, the final land of immortality. Ling Han. The Empress sent a mental thought to Ling Han from inside the Black Tower. With a thought from Ling Han, the Empress was summoned out. Sister-in-law. Both Feng Po Yun and Murong Qing greeted. They knew that the Empress was in seclusion inside the Black Tower. Yu Kaiyu also greeted her, but did not dare look too long at her. This sister-in-law was too beautiful. The Empress nodded in response. If it were not for the fact that these three men were Ling Han's elder brothers, she would not have paid them any regard. She was really too proud. About to break through? Ling Han asked. En. The Empress nodded. Wait for me. She took a step, and had already arrived in the galaxy. The great saint tribulation that she had to undergo was also incredibly terrifying, more frightening even than the Saint King tribulation that others had to go through. If she did not hurry to leave, Joint Peace Planet would no longer exist. Your Majesty. The Left Minister and the others hurriedly bowed. They were relatively more reverent of the Empress. After all, they had been cautiously living under the Empress's authority for about 1 million years. Boom! Lightning suddenly appeared in the galaxy. Even if there was a boundless distance separating them, it could still be clearly seen. Multiple giants of lightning thousands of meters tall appeared, surrounding and attacking the Empress in the galaxy. Everyone's faces turned pale as they watched that sea-like lightning, breaking out in a cold sweat. Even if they were standing here, they could still feel how frightening that lightning was. Her Majesty has also become a saint. The Left Minister and the others were all incredibly surprised and joyous. In their eyes, the stronger the Empress, the better, naturally. They were all soldiers under the Empress's rule. Long live your Majesty. The people that belonged to the chaotic star's majestic empire all knelt and bowed. The people of the Great Ling Empire, meanwhile, bore smiles of pride. No matter how strong the Empress was, she was still their king's woman. Ling Han's figure leaped, and he also entered the galaxy. He wanted to freeload the Empress's heavenly tribulation, and get himself some heavenly tribulation fluid. At present, the Empress was able to match this kind of heavenly tribulation, but was unable to forcefully enter into the heavenly tribulation to obtain the heavenly tribulation fluid. After all, the Empress did not have as strong a physique as he did, and could not bear being attacked simultaneously by as many as millions and millions of peak stage Saint Kings. She could only do so after she became a Saint King. And that wasn't certain, either. Ling Han stretched out a hand, delivering an attack at a lightning giant. Being crushed by the frightening power, the lightning giants immediately crumbled, and the heaven and earth was furious. New tribulation clouds appeared, forming a second heavenly tribulation. Above Joint Peace Planet, everyone was watching with gaping mouths. There actually was someone that would actively trifle with the heavenly tribulation. If this was any other person, that would be an idiot, but in Ling Han's case, he was a freak. Boom. Ling Han directly entered into the innermost depths of the heavenly tribulation. He wanted to finish this as soon as possible. Chapter 1668, Clearing Off Old Debts. Chapter 1668, Clearing Off Old Debts. How could the heavenly tribulation stop Ling Han? Its might had already reached the limits of the immortal realm, and even if Ling Han was helping the Empress undergo her heavenly tribulation, which logically would increase the might of the heavenly tribulation 10 times further, how was it supposed to increase by now? Boom, boom, boom. The heaven and earth was raging furiously, but only more lightning giants appeared. Ling Han did not pay them any regard at all. Like with a chariot rolling out, peng, 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 any lightning giant would be crushed. Though they could still reform, they were completely unable to stop Ling Han's advance. Very soon, he had charged into the depths of the tribulation clouds, and easily obtained the heavenly tribulation fluid. The heavenly tribulation suddenly vanished. On Joint Peace Planet, everyone was once again dumbfounded. What on earth is going on? The heaven and earth would also bully the weak and fear the strong. Why had the heavenly tribulation just struck a few times and then ran off? Ling Han watched from the sidelines. The Empress had just broken through, and could use the heavenly tribulation to temper her battle prowess, but right before the heavenly tribulation was about to dissipate, he had charged into the tribulation clouds and obtained a portion of heavenly tribulation fluid again. The two of them exchanged a smile, and walked back to Joint Peace Planet holding hands. Everyone knelt down and bowed, numb with excitement. Two saints in one family, what kind of concept was this? Putting aside Joint Peace Planet, even in the whole galaxy, and all the galaxies around, that was incredibly impressive. They did not know that Ling Han and the Empress's battle prowess could actually overwhelm all Saint Kings, or there would probably be a great many people that would pass out from the excitement. Congratulations, sister-in-law. Feng Po Yun and the others all approached to offer their congratulations. Though Li Weiwei and Ji Yuna behaved very casually with Ling Han, and were very carefree when they spent time together, they were like tame lambs that had seen a tiger in front of the Empress, and were not able to even take a step forwards. Instead, it was the left minister and the others that came forwards with congratulations. In any case, they had been incredibly reverent towards the Empress in the past, so there was not much difference now. The banquet had yet to end, but Ling Han had brought the Empress with him and ran. They had separated for 8 years, and had not spent many days together when the Empress began her seclusion period. Now that she had successfully accomplished her goal, they naturally had to work hard a bit on having children. The night of romance was always too short. Ling Han and the Empress clung together for a whole 8 days before ending their loving time together, and did some serious business. Another month later, everyone was prepared. Ling Han took those closest to him, such as Yuzhen Shan, Feng Po Yun, and the others, into the Black Tower, whereas the others were drawn into a spatial god tool, and then moved to leave. He delegated the responsibility for the Chaotic Star's Majestic Empire and the Great Ling Empire to the Left Minister and the others, and Ling Han spent some more effort to lay out a saint-level formation. As long as the formation was here, then even a great saint would not be able to do anything against them. It was not that Ling Han was not coming back. With the extended lifespans of cultivators of the immortal realm, even if he went off to the celestial realm and came back only 10,000 years later, there would actually not be too much change here. He could leave with an easy heart. 9 months later, Ling Han returned to Wood Figure Planet, and then directly went to the Mystery Realm. That Mystery Realm that had a different cultivation system was now called the Great River Mystery Realm because the natives inside all shared this identical label. Ling Han released everyone from inside the spatial god tool. If they cultivated here, the effects would be a good many times better. However, when he had just entered into the Great River Mystery Realm, Ling Han gave a soft yi. Compared to more than a year ago, the spiritual qi of this place had weakened slightly, though it was still very dense compared to other places. This initially was a completely sealed-off world, and now that it had been opened, it was inevitable that the spiritual qi would leak out. Going by that theory, there would ultimately come a day when this mystery realm would become ordinary, just like that frightening corpse inside. It would also completely vanish one day, and the inheritance and traditions of the natives would completely die out by then. Ling Han felt internally rueful, but the others were endlessly pleased and surprised. The spiritual qi of this place was too dense, so much so that they did not even dare imagine it could be this way. The Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden and the others were naturally still at the Yuan tribe. Ling Han had just arrived when a few of them said that they were about to break through. Everyone underwent heavenly tribulation one after another, and Ling Han continued to freeload off their heavenly tribulation. He could even disperse the heavenly tribulation for someone because this heaven and earth could no longer do anything to him. But when the 10th person underwent the heavenly tribulation, and Ling Han barged in, he discovered that the heavenly tribulation actually ignored him completely. There were no new tribulation clouds appearing, as if the heaven and earth also knew that they had no effect on him, so they were too lazy to even bother. How could that be allowed? Ling Han directly charged into that person's heavenly tribulation, but something that caused him depression happened. The tribulation clouds shrank, and instantly vanished. Fled. The heavenly tribulation actually fled. The Empress and the others were also very astonished, but then they all broke into laughter. This Ling Han was really a freak, scaring the heavenly tribulation into fleeing. This was something that had never happened before. Then didn't that mean that as long as Ling Han was willing, he could make it so that there would be no more heavenly tribulation in the whole immortal realm? Ling Han tried a few more times. It was of no use. Now, as long as he interfered in anyone else's heavenly tribulation, not only would there be no new heavenly tribulation targeting him, even the heavenly tribulation of others would also vanish. This brought the others amusement, but they couldn't help but also feel rueful. To exactly what extent was this guy strong that he could even make the heavenly tribulation turn and flee before him? Ling Han gave up the idea of obtaining heavenly tribulation fluid again. He planned to make another attempt when he headed to the netherworld in future. Since the two realms were separated, then they each naturally had their own bosses. Now that the heaven and earth of the immortal realm had turned its back on him, he should still have a chance in the netherworld. There were already Saint Kings coming back from the nearest forbidden lands, bringing their clansmen to cultivate inside the Great River Mystery Realm. Though the environment inside the Celestial Realm could possibly be like this as well, they had nothing else to do at the moment anyways, so what was the point of wasting time? However, Ling Han set out once more. He still had many old debts to clear off with certain forbidden lands. In the past, they had coveted the Celestial King technique he possessed, and joined forces to attack him. He had only killed a single Open Clouds king, but did those that were left now think that they were spared because of that? Ling Han was not bloodthirsty, but he was not so generous that he could smile and consider the matter forgotten when others had bullied him. The first place he went to was the 8 Stones Forbidden Land. The 8 Stones Forbidden Land still had one Saint King, but he was not at the peak stage. However, even if he was a peak stage Saint King, he would not be a match for Ling Han. What was this kind of Saint King worth? Ling Han wasted all the cultivation levels of everyone in the 8 Stones Forbidden Land, and did not commit a massacre. In future, they would still be able to develop. That would be with their own abilities, but judging by the look of things now, the link of karma between them and Ling Han could be considered to have been ended. However, Ling Han would naturally not forget about ransacking them. He obtained 3 pieces of saintly material, 12 saint tools, as well as 2 saintly medicines. Ling Han did not care whether it was saintly material or a saint tool. As long as it was made of level 17 godly metal, he would have the divine demon sword swallow it. Probably, with all the forbidden lands added together, it would be enough to boost the divine demon sword to level 18. Next, he would be going to the celestial realm to increase its grade. However, with how bountiful the resources were in the celestial realm, this obviously would not be a problem. After leaving the 8 Stones Forbidden Land, Ling Han toured the forbidden lands one after another. There were more and more saintly materials and saintly medicines in his possession, and when he swept through the stock of the 13th Forbidden Land, the divine demon sword had finally advanced into level 18. Ling Han immediately handed all the level 18 godly metal in his possession to be swallowed by the divine demon sword, but if he wanted to boost the divine demon sword up to level 19, the amount of level 18 godly metal would have to be multiplied by 100-fold, at the very least. This was completely impossible to do. Perhaps if he slowly searched for a few tens of thousands years in the ancient realm, he might be able to accomplish this mission. After clearing off all the old debts, Ling Han entered into the netherworld. He was going to bring the Overlord Sword Demon Master, the Hysteria Demon Master, Ouyang Taishan, and the others, and when the people from both sides were present, he was going to barge his way into the celestial realm. Chapter 1669, Breaking Open the Doors to the Celestial Realm. Chapter 1669, Breaking Open the Doors to the Celestial Realm. Ling Han entered into the netherworld from the nearest 2-realm battlefield, and after calculating the galactic coordinates, he unfurled a golden path, heading towards Sea Space Planet. Coincidentally, he encountered an eternal river Tyr undergoing the heavenly tribulation on his way there. He immediately stepped on the brakes and halted, barging into the other's heavenly tribulation. That man was a young king tier, and had advanced into the pinnacle level of the eternal river tier after cultivating for only 1,000,000 years, which could be considered very shocking. When he saw Ling Han barge in, his face involuntarily turned green in shock. What on earth is going on? I am undergoing a heavenly tribulation. What do you mean by barging in? Do you want to kill me? Otherwise, who would take the risk of being pulled into the heavenly tribulation and barge in? But I don't even know you. Senior. When he saw that Ling Han was stepping on a golden path, he realized that this was a demon master. Whether he was a black demon or a heaven demon, he would be able to crush him easily with a single finger either way. Ling Han grinned, and shot out a punch at the heavenly tribulation. Boom. What made him pleasantly surprised was the fact that the heavenly tribulation immediately reacted, forming new tribulation clouds. As expected, the two realms were separate, and even the wills of the heaven and earth were completely different. That eternal river tier almost bit his tongue. Was this senior an idiot? He took the initiative to trifle with the heavenly tribulation, and actually looked very pleased at that. Do you like to be struck by lightning so much? Even if you are a demon master, so what? You were strong, and the heavenly tribulation would only be even stronger. If you showed off too much, you would definitely be struck by lightning. But his face immediately twitched. He was so shocked that all the pores on his body were wide open. What had he seen? As multiple bolts of lightning took the form of giants, the aura that each of them exuded was strong enough to make him go into a breakdown, and their number was hair-raising. It was not just one or two, but rather millions and millions of them, and that number was even increasing endlessly. Could any human undergo such a heavenly tribulation? Ling Han gave a battle cry, and charged into the tribulation clouds. Peng, 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 he crushed everything in his way, shattering one giant after another as he went. Fuck, that eternal river tier directly shouted what he thought. Because he was too stunned, he completely forgot that he was undergoing a heavenly tribulation, and was instantly struck by a lightning bolt, which caused him severe injury. Ling Han was invincible everywhere he went. He had merged the regulations of the two realms to reach this kind of cultivation level, and whether it was the netherworld or the immortal realm, his battle prowess did not decrease the slightest. He charged into the depths of the tribulation clouds, and easily obtained the heavenly tribulation fluid. Though I haven't drunk it, I am sure that this is slightly different than what I got in the immortal realm. The moment the heavenly tribulation fluid was taken, the tribulation clouds immediately dispersed. Ling Han stood proudly in the galaxy, and when he saw that the eternal river tier previously was in a critical situation, he lent him a helping hand, taking over for him for his heavenly tribulation, and once again charged into the tribulation clouds. In merely a short while, the heavenly tribulation dispersed once more. Thank you, Senior, for your help. That eternal river tier had been scared silly, thanking Ling Han with a trembling voice, though it was also because he had been stunned by Ling Han that he suffered a severe injury. Otherwise, with his natural talent and strength, he would definitely have had no problem undergoing a heavenly tribulation. He was also internally rueful. Everyone said that he was extraordinarily talented, but from today onwards, he would not have any more arrogance. Just look at this person. That was what true awesome was like. Ling Han smiled at the person, and unfurled the golden path, continuing his journey. It would take more than half a year to reach C Space Planet from here, and Ling Han actually encountered two other people undergoing their heavenly tribulation on his way, which naturally allowed him to freeload off their heavenly tribulation another 2 times, giving him an additional 4 portions of heavenly tribulation fluid. Half a year later, C Space Planet appeared in front of him again. Wang, the golden path spread over, and the Hysteria Demon Master immediately came out to receive him. He looked like he was completely guarded, right until he could see that the visitor was Ling Han. He was so stunned and gaped so widely that he could fit 2 eggs in his open mouth. Demon Master. Not only was he a demon master, he was an earth demon at that. This was too inconceivable. Over a dozen years ago, when Ling Han left, he was only in the Eternal River tier. Ling Han laughed loudly, and reminisced with the Hysteria Demon Master, as well as explained the purpose of his visit. After that, he went to Cold Cloud's planet to inform the Overlord Sword Demon Master. He stayed here for a very short time, fearing that he would meet Xu Xian, that infatuated girl. Finally, Ling Han informed Ouyang Taishan, telling him that he could bring people to gather here. He waited for 2 years' time, and everyone finally gathered on Sea Space Planet. The Overlord Sword Demon Master, the Hysteria Demon Master, and Ouyang Taishan brought all the people that they should bring through their respective spatial god tools, and set out with Ling Han. They entered into the immortal realm through the two-realm passageway, and also came to the Great River Mystery Realm. This return trip took another 3 years' time. In this time, Ling Han had also obtained 20 portions of heavenly tribulation fluid in the netherworld, but this was the limit. After that, the heaven and earth of the netherworld behaved like the heaven and earth of the immortal realm. Once he interfered, the heavenly tribulation would immediately dissipate, not giving him another chance to obtain the heavenly tribulation fluid anymore. This naturally caused the 3 demon masters' faces to twitch, their eyes almost popping out in shock. This should be about it. I'll give everyone 1 more month, and after that, we enter into the celestial realm. Ling Han gathered the masses, and announced the time for entering into the celestial realm. Those of the Forbidden Lands were both excited and terrified. They were finally able to return to their true homeland, but they were the ones that had been expelled in the past, and now that they returned once more to the celestial realm, would they be targeted? The young king tiers like Zi Chenfeng and the second in the world were filled with blazing fighting spirit. They could become leaders in the immortal realm, and were confident that they would also stay ahead of the masses even in the celestial realm. All of them could barely wait. The large black dog, the heavenly emperor of thunder and fire, the rabbit, and the old ginseng also returned. The rock golem chased after Ling Han all day like a dog. Little Qing, meanwhile, was very proud, and crouched behind Ling Han. Occasionally, she would stretch out her wings and peck him, astonishingly elegant. These guys had all been nurtured with Ling Han's full effort, they had even consumed saintly medicine before. Ling Han gave that natural psychic fruit to the Empress. He was sure that he could also advance rapidly even in the celestial realm, and did not need to depend on such celestial medicine to increase his cultivation level. If it would actually increase his power directly, Ling Han would not be reserved. A month later, the time to enter into the celestial realm had finally arrived. Everyone had long since entered into the spatial god tools. All the saints and demon masters had also entered themselves when they handed the spatial god tools over to Ling Han. Though Ling Han and the Empress were presently able to break open the doors to the celestial realm, they worried that if the two of them opened the doorway at the same time, they would enter from 2 completely different places. Thus, the Empress also handed this honor over to Ling Han, while she herself entered into the Black Tower. And now, Ling Han was the only person left. At present, he had already arrived at a dark, cold area of the universe. He inhaled softly. After entering into the celestial realm, he would be able to see his parents, Sun, Hunyo, and the others. He had suppressed this thought at the bottom of his heart, yet now it was completely unleashed, and this desire became incredibly powerful. I am coming. He laughed loudly, gathered his full strength, and began to tear a rip into space. The regulations of the 2 realms collided. He used his full effort, and suddenly multiple layers of space broke apart, revealing a dark, quiet cave entrance. Ling Han did not enter. The doors that connected to the celestial realm were not opened yet. If he barged in right now, he would only be stuck in an endless empty void. He continued the struggle, and after throwing over 1,000 punches, with sword chi slashing out endlessly, this cave entrance became wider and considerably deeper, and there was an obscure light that was gradually appearing. Like a mirror, he could see that another realm was appearing at the other end of the cave. The celestial realm was gradually becoming clearer in front of Ling Han's eyes. Chapter 1670 First arrived at the celestial realm. Chapter 1670 First arrived at the celestial realm. Ling Han did not hesitate any further, and entered with a single step. When he arrived in front of that mirror, he delivered the final strike. Crack! A crisp sound rang out, echoing through the whole heaven and earth, and alerting both the immortal realm and netherworld. This was the barrier between the ancient realm and the celestial realm. Only a great saint that had merged the regulations of both realms could manage to break through this barrier, and now it had shattered. The great doors to the celestial realm had officially opened. Boom, endless spiritual chi surged over, and that hole that he had pierced open was currently closing back up behind Ling Han. The heaven and earth had their own instinctive recovery ability, its speed astonishingly quick, approaching Ling Han swiftly, as well as stopping this large volume of spiritual chi from entering into the immortal realm. Ling Han's figure flashed, and shot towards the celestial realm. Behind him, that passageway was swiftly closing up. Xiao, he flew rapidly, and suddenly appeared in the air. Behind him, a black hole opened up for a moment, and quickly closed off. Ling Han stood in the air, while there was an indescribably expansive forest beneath him. Every tree was thousands of meters tall, and had leaves that were even larger than houses. Some had even bore fruit, which were incredibly and extraordinarily massive. The spiritual chi here was too plentiful, a good many times denser than even in the Great River Mystery Realm. Ling Han had just swept an eye over, and had already found at least 17 godly medicines that were above level 10, and the highest grade even reached up to level 15. But the scale over which his divine sense could spread over had also been greatly limited. Additionally, the height at which he could fly was also limited. The celestial realm was different from the ancient realm. This place was very big, and a city here was like a great star. However, the whole celestial realm was an integral whole, and was only separated by an ocean into two mainlands, which were called the Eastern Celestial Realm and the Western Celestial Realm. There were also a few random small islands in the ocean. Of course, they were small only in relative terms to the two mainlands. In truth, any of the islands was shockingly as huge as a whole galaxy of the ancient realm. According to the Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire, the ocean was very dangerous. In a moment of carelessness, one could easily encounter a severing mundane tier, dividing soul tier, or even immortal palace tier and ascending origin tier level immortal beasts. If they were the hot-tempered type, they would easily destroy the sea vessel along with everyone on board with a single move. Thus, crossing the ocean was a very risky matter. Ordinarily, only very large forces would establish marine routes and charge their passengers an exorbitant fee. Flying across the ocean? That would only be delusional because the altitude that one could fly at was limited, and if they encountered powerful immortal beasts, the latter could easily swallow any person who was flying just by opening their mouths, which was similarly dangerous. Thankfully, Ling Han presently did not need to consider the problem of crossing the ocean. He did not even know where the rock palace was. The first step was to find his footing here. Ling Han released the Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire, the large black dog, and the Empress from the Spatial God Tools and Black Tower, respectively. The Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire had been an immortal palace tier elite in the first place, and the large black dog was also linked in countless ways with the celestial realm. "I've finally returned," the Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire exclaimed ruefully. He had also become a young man in his 20s by now, and finally did not look so awkward. "Where is this place?" Ling Han asked. "With how big the celestial realm is, how should I know?" The Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire rolled his eyes at him. "Putting me aside, even a great many celestial kings might not have traveled through every corner of the celestial realm, what more when there are a great many restricted areas that not even celestial kings may dare enter." Ling Han sighed, and replied, "If you don't know, just be frank about it. You don't have to come up with so many excuses." "That's right." The large black dog hit him while he was down. "Youngster, don't pretend you know if you're ignorant." The Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire humphed. As his new body grew up, he had also become considerably more mature, no longer getting into a fight with the large black dog at the slightest provocation. "Let's go find a city first. We should not linger in this kind of primitive forest. With our present strength, we would be dead if we encountered any immortal beast. We would not even be able to flee. Additionally, we should not fly in the skies. That would make ourselves too big a target." Ling Han, the Empress, and the others all descended as he said. In this place, it was clear that the Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire had the greatest right of speech. As for the large black dog, could his words be believed? In this kind of dense forest, Ling Han and his group were incredibly minuscule. Any single leaf that fell would be a great many times bigger than them. However, It was not every demonic beast in the celestial realm that was incredibly powerful. Linghan also saw ordinary ants. Of course, they were considerably bigger than normal, and possessed strength at least on the level of spiritual ocean tier. In the celestial realm, this was what ordinary was like. According to the heavenly emperor of thunder and fire, most people would be in the shattering void tier upon birth, and the stronger their parents, the higher the starting point for the child that would be born out of such a union. It was rumored that the son of a celestial king could even be in the severing mundane tier upon birth. But any force that had the slightest bit of strength would disperse the infant's cultivation level before the child had been born, converting it into natural fertilizer to improve their natural talent. In the celestial realm, it was relatively very simple to cultivate to the Genesis tier, but it would be too difficult to further improve one's natural talent after that. Thus, this was a wise choice. Furthermore, this was not something that could be easily done, either. The clan had to have an ancestor that was at least in the severing mundane tier to be able to cast this kind of secret technique. Don't think that severing mundane ancestors were cheap in the celestial realm. It was exactly the opposite. As long as one had advanced into the severing mundane tier, they would be greatly valued by any force. However, since they had obtained an endless lifespan, what severing mundane ancestor would be willing to live relying on someone else's charity? In the celestial realm, the unit of measure for forces would be cities. A celestial king-level force could even possess cities that numbered in the hundreds of millions, and every city was comparable to a great star, which showed how strong a force was. Even the smallest one-star city would have a severing mundane tier overseer. Otherwise, it could not be called a city, and could only be called a gathering spot. Linghan's group traveled in the forest. They did not have any goal, and were only heading in a fixed direction. In the celestial realm, there was no difference between day and night. Though there were also stars scattered across the skies, they were like small worlds, and were not real stars but rather massive asteroids. From a certain aspect, this was not much different from a small world, though the space was larger, and the regulations were of an even higher level. Thus, they could only use the time that had passed to calculate how many days had passed. After about 10 days, they had finally walked out of this massive forest. A large river appeared ahead of them. It was incredibly wide as 1,000 miles, and meandered for very far, without any end in sight. There's a ship. And behind them, there was presently a large ship that was riding the waves. This ship was astonishingly huge, as long as 3,000 meters, and just as wide. But traveling in this great river, it did not look remarkable at all, and would not have any difficulty in turning because of its humongous size, either. It was moving at a very rapid speed, and soon surpassed them, heading forwards. In the celestial realm, the limits of speed had been released. Even a ship could match the speed of Linghan running at full speed. Now it's easy. We can just follow the river, and we will definitely find a city on the way, the heavenly emperor of thunder and fire said. They would not be able to board this passing ship, but at least they knew that they would definitely come across a city as long as they followed the river course, which also set their minds at ease. However, they might come across a city even faster if they were to go in the opposite direction. They gave it some thought, but still decided to head forwards. Another month later, they finally saw a large city appear before them. It was so big that its boundaries could not be seen. They could only see that this great river was on the left side of the city, and there were at least a few hundred ships that were docked there. Chapter 1671, It's Really So Coincidental. Chapter 1671, It's Really So Coincidental. That was a waterway, they could not enter into the city through here. The Empress wore a face veil. She was too beautiful, and with their present strength, they were still too weak in the celestial realm. If she became targeted by a profligate young master of any clan, there would be great trouble. Of course, they should avoid using the Black Tower as much as possible. This was the celestial realm. Perhaps severing mundane tiers or dividing soul tiers could see through the secret of the Black Tower. They circled around the city for at least half a day, and only then did they find a main road which led to the city. This was really a major route, being indescribably wide. Really, it was not inferior to that great river at all, and extended to the city. They could see that the city gateway was also similarly wide. Was this really a gateway into the city? It was practically an insurmountable barrier. However, the city gates were presently closed, while there was a small door that was open at its side which was guarded by soldiers. Even if it was a small door, it was about 300 meters wide and 3,000 meters tall, and looked incredibly majestic and grand. The Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire gestured for them to stop, and said, "If we want to enter into the city, we have to pay a fee, ordinarily star stones which are refined from those asteroids in the skies that have fallen. They contain the great Tao of the heaven and earth. Otherwise, we can only use saintly medicine." Ling Han and the Empress exchanged a look, both feeling rueful. Entry into the city required a fee of saintly medicine. This was practically daylight robbery. Spatial god tools are too common here. It would not deceive anyone if we were to hide them, and if we bring them into the city like that, it would be seen as deliberately breaching the city laws. By then, there would definitely be elites mobilized to suppress us, the Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire said. Ling Han nodded. Then we can only release the others somewhere nearby. They retreated more than 10,000 miles away. Because it was near the city, there weren't any overly fierce demonic beasts, and immortal beasts were even more impossible. The Blue Feather Saint, Ouyang Taishan, Star Sand Saint, and the others all appeared. Ling Han explained the circumstances to them, and the saints all nodded. This was the celestial realm, where spiritual qi was not only denser, the regulations of the two realms were also complete. As long as there was enough time, these saints would have hopes of becoming severing mundane ancestors they were able to cultivate to the saint tier in the ancient realm, which proved that all of them were extraordinarily gifted, so there was definitely hope for them to advance into the severing mundane tier. They would stay here first whilst looking for saintly medicine nearby, and gradually send their people into the city in future. Ling Han was already extremely benevolent to have brought them here. With the warning of the Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire, everyone prepared the same statement. They were all natives of the celestial realm, and had been living in the celestial realm since childhood. They did not have any relation to the ancient realm at all. Otherwise, if the secret was leaked out, they would all be hunted down and executed. Hence, the first thing on the agenda was to merge the regulations of the two realms. If they were unable to do this, they would not need to enter into the city. If they were discovered, it would be equivalent to confessing that they had come from the ancient realm. After they were settled, Ling Han and his group entered the city. Ling Han could still afford 4 saintly medicines. If it was not for the fact that the Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire and the large black dog did not know of the existence of the Black Tower, Ling Han really wanted to draw the Empress into the Black Tower as well. In that manner, he would have been able to save 1 saintly medicine. Halt! When they arrived at the small city gateway, they were stopped by 2 guards. These 2 were actually Eternal River tier elites. There were a total of 16 guards, and all of them were in this cultivation level, showing how high the overall level of cultivation of the celestial realm was. However, the Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire immediately curled his lip, and communicated a message through divine sense. This should be a 1-star city, or a 2-star city at most. Otherwise, it would be absolutely impossible for only a few Eternal River tiers to be guarding the gates. He added further that if it was a 5-star city which had a celestial king overseer, though the guards were only Genesis tiers, there would definitely be 1 or 2 severing mundane tier inspectors in the vicinity. Entrance fee. One of the guards stretched out his hand. Ling Han bore with the heartache. Usually, it was only he who would be robbing others, yet now he had to bear with being robbed, which depressed him greatly. He handed over 4 saintly medicines. Thankfully, they were only level 17, which could be considered some comfort. Go in then. That guard waved them off. When they passed through the city gates, a ray of light shot down, and swept over their bodies. This was to inspect for any spatial god tools. It was not only to prevent the emergence of stowaways if any opposing force snuck in a large number of elites via a spatial god tool, and suddenly attacked from within, that would become a huge problem. After the 4 of them entered into the city, the Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire immediately planned to make himself scarce. Brat, then we will go our separate ways from now on. I want to go and concentrate on cultivation, make a comeback, and then kill all those bastards that had hunted me. He left confidently after saying these words. Then Grandpa Dog is also going to go free, but don't worry, little Han. I have already remembered your scent, and even if you die and are buried in a grave, I will still be able to find you. The large black dog's words were much more annoying. Just get lost. Ling Han shot out a foot, and the large black dog immediately raced off with his rear swaying behind him, incredibly showy. It was good that they had left. Now, it was just him and the Empress left. Of course, there was still a large group of people in the Black Tower. This was called a city, but its size was comparable to a planet. Thus, there were tall mountains that were enshrouded in clouds, ceaselessly surging rivers, blazing deserts, and icy plains here. All kinds of environments existed here. There were innumerable passers-by on the streets, and not one of them cast a second glance on Ling Han and the Empress. Ling Han suddenly had the misconception that they were already citizens of the celestial realm. He walked slowly with the Empress whilst listening in on the conversations of the passers-by. This was their first time here, and neither of them had any experience with this realm, so they naturally had to make more observations and speak less. Actually, the people of the celestial realm were not much different. Aside from the fact that the overall level of cultivation was higher, being here did not make them feel like they were in a different place from the ancient realm. Ling Han and the Empress listened in on the discussions of others on the way, and the most common topic of conversation was that the Dark Blue Moon Army was presently recruiting in preparation for military service. Ling Han's expression involuntarily became strange. Dark Moon Army? Could it be that this was Dark Moon City? The Dark Moon City the Ding clan that Ding Zizhen and Ding Yarolong belonged to? It couldn't be so coincidental, right? Yet, it was really so coincidental. There were a total of 3 great severing mundane tier forces in Dark Moon City, and the Ding clan was precisely one of them. However, though the Dark Moon Army was under the unified administration of these 3 great severing mundane tier forces, the true ownership of it did not belong to these 3 great forces. Why? In the celestial realm, all smaller forces needed to find a backer. Severing mundane tiers would look for dividing soul tiers, while dividing soul tiers would seek immortal palace tiers, and when one had reached immortal palace tier, they would be able to establish their own rule in the celestial realm, and did not need to look for other backers at all. Of course, if they wanted to, they could. For example, under the barrier of Celestial King tier forces, there would definitely be Ascending Origin tier and Immortal Palace tier elites. Dark Moon City was a 1-star city, belonging to the lowest rank. Their backer was a dividing soul tier force, Black Moon Sect. The Black Moon Sect's backer was the Fu clan. Thus, this Dark Moon Army theoretically belonged to the Fu clan. However, there were thousands of cities under the rule of the Fu clan, so they naturally would not supervise all matters, regardless of their importance. Hence, the Dark Moon Army was still controlled by the 3 great clans in reality. However, after joining the Dark Moon Army, as long as one showed outstanding performance, he would have a chance of being promoted and joining the army of a 4-star great city, and if that was continued by further stunning performance, he would be able to enter into a 3-star great city and enter into the line of sight of the Fu clan. In the celestial realm, becoming a severing mundane ancestor would mean an endless lifespan, but why were there so few dividing soul tier and immortal palace tier elites? Firstly, high-grade celestial techniques were rare, and secondly, it was the problem of resources. This was not a problem that could be solved through simply living a few more billion years. Hence, if one could join a great sect or great clan, that was the fastest shortcut for lower-class cultivators to rise above the rest. And there was such an opportunity in front of them now. The Dark Moon Army was recruiting reserve troops. There would only be such a chance every 100 years, and if they missed it, they would have to wait another 100 years. Ling Han looked at the Empress, and the Empress nodded. They needed a chance to integrate themselves into the celestial realm, and this Dark Moon Army was their best option. Chapter 1672, Enlisting. Chapter 1672, Enlisting. Ling Han and the Empress journeyed towards the western part of Dark Moon City. This city was too colossal, being comparable to a great star. They could claim to have traveled over land and water, and only arrive at their destination a day later. This was a range of hills, and an empty space had been cleared at the base. They could clearly feel that there was a protective formation, and the might that it unleashed should be capable of insta-killing Genesis tiers, reaching the level of the severing mundane tier. There were a great many people here. Clearly, joining the Dark Moon Army was a wonderful opportunity for one to excel, and anyone with the slightest bit of ambition would not want to miss it. Thus, there were crowds of people, and they could see people in all directions they looked. It was not just limited to pure humans, either. There were also half-humans, and they occupied a great proportion of the crowd. Among the many races, the human race had the highest tolerance level, so even if a great many humans looked purely human, there was actually the bloodline of demonic beasts flowing in their bodies. There was a very long line at the registration area, and Ling Han and the Empress also lined up obediently behind the masses. In the ancient realm, they were already strong enough to conquer all opposition, but in this place, Genesis tier was really not enough. As they lined up, the two of them also listened to the idle conversations of others to increase their knowledge of the celestial realm. However, the most common topic was the recruitment. This time, the Dark Moon Army would recruit a total of 1,000 people to become their reserve troops. These 1,000 people would be divided into 10 teams, with 100 per team. Then, in the next 90 years from now onwards, one person would be knocked out every single year. Finally, every team would be left with 10 people, totaling up to 100 people who would truly become members of the Dark Moon Army to replenish the wear and tear of the Dark Moon Army. The Celestial Realm was a place that was filled with battles. Though the Dark Moon City had a backer, and it was rare for large-scale battles to take place, this was not a lone city. It needed to do business with other cities, and this concerned the problem of transport. Between any two cities, there would definitely be mountain bandits, and the task of the Dark Moon Army was to regularly purge some mountain bandits. Otherwise, if the bandits were too rampant, not only would it affect the reputation of the Dark Moon City, it would also damage their direct profits. However, those that would become mountain bandits were basically below the severing mundane tier, and the severing mundane ancestors of the Dark Moon City were too lazy to even bother wasting time to search for these mountain bandits because they were like weeds. If one batch was eliminated, a new one would pop up. There would always be people taking risks and wanting to reap profits without working for it. Hence, the task of suppressing the thieves was handed over to the Dark Moon Army. Sometimes, they would also be hired by traveling merchants as protection, and earn some extra income on the side. All things considered, after one joined the Dark Moon Army, he would be able to obtain a regular amount of cultivation resources, and those that accomplished military merits would even get celestial techniques. Sometimes, they would also have extra gains. Aside from the fact that it was more dangerous, it really did not have any disadvantages. Added with the fact that one could also be promoted and finally enter into the Fu clan, the masses would naturally scramble for the opportunity. The progress of the troop was very slow. A few hours had passed, and Ling Han and the Empress had only advanced half the way forwards. Because the two of them had come very late, they were the final two, and there was no one else lining up behind them. It was at this moment that a young man flew over from the distance, ADN directly charged to the registration area. He was clearly cutting the line here, but the people at the registration area actually did not chase him off, but rather helped him register politely. This incited fury from the crowd, and a great many people jumped up. What gives him the right? That's right. We are all honestly lining up here. Why is he allowed to cut in? This is unjust. However, someone immediately poured cold water on them, and asked, "You guys don't even know who that is." "Who?" That person shook his head, looking at them like they were idiots. "That is a prodigy of the younger generation of the Ding clan, Ding Xiaochen. This whole Dark Moon Army is theirs, so what if he cut into the line?" With these words, everyone lost their anger, but there was also someone mumbling under their breath, "This is not the Ding clans, it belongs to the Fu clan." Even if it was not the Fu clan, there is still the Black Moon sect, and there are also two other great clans. Ding Xiaochen is a prodigy with astonishing natural talent in cultivation. It is said that he has formed over 600 million stars when he was in the Eternal River tier, and now that he is a Saint King, who could be a match for him among his peers? Sigh, I initially had thought of aiming for the position of team captain, but from the look of things now, the pressure has increased considerably. There is one less position available out of the 10 positions. Strange, Ding Xiaochen still needs to join the Dark Moon Army to earn military credits. What cultivation resources would he even lack? Ho ho, perhaps he has come here to show off. Wrong, wrong. A person wagged his finger, pretending to be mysterious. Seeing the people around him look in his direction, he smiled proudly, and said, "That is because there is another person that would be coming here today, and Ding Xiaochen has come for that person." "Who is it?" Everyone pressed the question. "You guys will know later," the person answered, feigning mysteriousness. At this time, a commotion was suddenly heard from ahead of them. "What is it?" Those behind were not clear about the situation, and did not dare extend their divine sense to find out, either. There was a severing mundane tier elite overseeing things here. Who would dare release their divine sense in front of such an elite and challenge his authority? Ding Xiaochen actually has 3-star aptitude. Very quickly, someone who was in front informed them of the situation. What? Everyone was shocked. In the celestial realm, there was a different kind of method to estimate the natural talent of cultivators. Basically, it was to calculate the tier-surpassing battle prowess of a cultivator, but there was also potential of growth and so on, which was not completely identical with the ancient realm. Ordinarily, 1-star aptitude would be worthy of nurturing, 2-star aptitude could be considered a prodigy, and 3 stars would be a prodigy among prodigies. As expected of a young king tier from the Ding clan, this was too amazing. "So this is a disciple that has been nurtured by the 3 great clans?" someone asked softly with a trembling voice. Before this, there were indeed a few top talents, but they only had 2-star aptitude. Most people would only have 1-star aptitude. Everyone shook their heads. This gap was really too wide, so wide that they did not even have the heart to feel envious. They could only admire such talent from afar. Xiao, it was at this moment that another figure shot over from the distance. Dressed in dazzlingly crimson robes, it was a young girl as beautiful as a fairy, a lovely young woman with a snow-white complexion, while her hair was as black as ink, forming a powerful juxtaposition. She looked extremely enchanting. That is Maro Shuyu, the only daughter of Great Commander Maro Dai of the Dark Moon Army. Hiss, Great Commander Maro Dai? That is a 3rd Severance Grand Elder. Lord Maro is a living legend. In the past, he came all alone to Dark Moon City. Who would have thought that he could have become a 3rd Severance Grand Elder in 3 eras? I get it. Ding Xiaochen has come for the sake of Maro Shuyu. He, Lord Maro is the only severing mundane tier in Dark Moon City that does not belong to any of the 3 great clans, and a 3rd Severance at that. With his freakish talent, becoming a 4th Severance consummate level would definitely be no issue. By then, it is highly possibly that he would be directly transferred over by the Fu clan, and a meteoric career success is just round the corner. Thus, the 3 great clans must all want to maintain good relations with him. Even if he continues to stay in Dark Moon City, a 3rd Severance Grand Elder is still a top-tier elite, and is worth them fighting over him at all costs. Furthermore, isn't marrying his daughter the least expensive and safest method? Sigh, if I could marry her, that'd be great. As everyone discussed spiritedly, the young woman in red did not take advantage of her superior status to cut into the line like Ding Xiaochen had. Instead, she obediently joined the end of the line, which just happened to be right behind Ling Han and the Empress. Chapter 1673, 3.5 stars aptitude. Chapter 1673, 3.5 stars aptitude. Ding Xiaochen immediately walked over from the front, his expression filled with arrogance, as if there was no one important enough to garner his attention. However, when he arrived in front of Maro Shuyu, he immediately cracked a smile, and said, "Shuyu, why do you have to line up with these lowly commoners? Come, I will bring you to the front." Ding Xiaochen, who allowed you to directly address me by name? Maro Shuyu did not appreciate his offer at all. You can either call me Miss Mao or call me Maro Shuyu. Ding Xiaochen looked slightly embarrassed after getting the cold shoulder from her. His eyes swept over, and when he spotted Ling Han and the Empress, he involuntarily took out his anger on them, and shouted, "What are you two looking at?" Ling Han was not the type that was willing to be bullied. He was just about to speak when he saw Maro Shuyu stretch out a hand in front of him. She asked, "What are you being so fierce to others for?" Ding Xiaochen's eyes were dark, and he glared fiercely at Ling Han because the Empress was a woman, after all. He smirked internally. When they went through the selection process, he would definitely target and kill this guy. He humphed and strode off. This guy is very petty, and will definitely target the two of you, Maro Shuyu said to Ling Han and the Empress. Don't worry. With me there, he will not dare do anything to the two of you. When the selection process begins later, the two of you just stay beside me, and I will ensure your safety. She was really quite confident. Ling Han involuntarily laughed, and replied, then thank you. He made his decision. Later, if he was to encounter Ding Xiaochen, he would definitely let him know the true depth of his abilities. The Empress, meanwhile, didn't even pay him any regard. Her life philosophy was very simple: if anything made her unhappy, just kill it. The line slowly advanced, and a few prodigies would occasionally appear, which would stun the masses. However, in the celestial realm, this city was really too small. It was really difficult for such freakish prodigies like Ling Han, the Empress, and the Rain Emperor to appear. Lastly, it was finally Ling Han and the Empress's turn, followed by Maro Shuyu, and there was no one else after. The Empress went first. This was the first test. According to the rules, only those who had reached the Eternal River tier would be qualified to register, while the highest limit was Genesis tier. Severing Mundane tier? If there were any Severing Mundane tiers that were willing to join the Dark Moon Army, then even Great Commander Maro Dai would gladly come out to receive them instead. What need was there for one to have to come here to register? The test was very simple. There was only a stone, but there was a formation inscribed on it. One only had to deliver a full power strike against it, and it would reflect the candidate's cultivation level and aptitude. The main deciding factor was battle prowess. Aside from that, the quality of their origin power and unique cultivation techniques would also be recorded by the formation, analyzed, integrated, and graded. This could be considered to be quite accurate. The Empress stretched out a slender hand as fair as snow, her fingers long and slender like spring onions. Even if she had concealed her appearance and changed into loose robes, hiding her perfect figure, a great many people were still besotted when they saw her unadorned hand. This was a great beauty and bewitching demoness that could conquer the whole world with her charms. Under the attention of innumerable pairs of eyes, the Empress pressed lightly on the testing stone. Suddenly, the testing stone released a white halo, which swiftly disappeared. Soon after, a slim line appeared on the left and right of the testing stone. That was two pillars of light, one red and the other purple. The red ray of light was only half as high as the purple one. High extreme of the Genesis tier, 2.5 stars aptitude. The examiner raised his head to look at the Empress, showing an expression of shock. This was an astonishing natural talent that was inferior only to Ding Xiaochen's. However, the Empress was not the only prodigy of this grade, but she definitely could be ranked among the top 10. This red line represented cultivation level, while the purple line represented aptitude, which was closely connected with battle prowess. If the purple line exceeded the red line, it meant that the candidate possessed tier-surpassing battle prowess, and the more it exceeded it, the higher his tier-surpassing battle prowess. Of course, the majority of people here had two lines of equal height, while a very small number of people had red lines that exceeded their purple lines. This would mean immediate elimination. The Dark Moon Army did not need trash, not even for their reserve troops. They would only show 2-star aptitude. This was the conclusion that she and Ling Han had come to after discussion. They did not want to attract too much attention. Their knowledge of the Celestial Realm and Dark Moon City was truly too limited. However, the Empress had not undergone such a test before, so in a moment of carelessness, her grade showed 2.5 stars. Passed, your serial number is 5572. The examiner registered the Empress, and gave her a plaque. Without having been officially recruited, they would not even bother to record the actual names of the candidates. The Empress took the plaque, and still did not speak. She only stepped back a bit and waited for Ling Han. Ling Han smiled at Maro Shuyu, and said, "Miss Mao, you can go first." As a man, he was still quite gentlemanly. He would just be the last to take his turn. Maro Shuyu did not refuse his kind offer, and walked forwards. After concentrating slightly, She struck a heavy blow on the testing stone. White light surged, and immediately disappeared. The red and purple line appeared once more. Consummate level of the Genesis tier, 3-star aptitude, the examiner exclaimed in shock. Finally, another super genius had appeared, not allowing Ding Xiaochen to be the only excellent one there. However, this was very normal. One was a prodigy from the Ding clan, while the other was the only daughter of the great commander. From birth, they were already at a higher level than others, so wasn't it absolutely normal for them to be far ahead in the lead? Miss Mao, your serial number is 5573. The examiner even stood up deliberately to hand over the plaque to Mao Shuyu. It couldn't be helped. Her old man was the superior of his superior. How could he not be extra polite? Mao Shuyu was very energetic. She was about to leave after taking the plaque, but she had just taken 2 steps when she stopped and turned to look at Ling Han. Clearly, Ling Han had allowed her to be tested first, so she, too, wanted to give Ling Han some face. At least, she would watch as he completed his test. Furthermore, she still remembered her promise to protect Ling Han and his companion. In the distance, Ding Xiaochen crossed his arms over his chest, a smug look on his face. At first, Ling Han had planned to keep a low profile, but when he saw this expression on Ding Xiaochen's face, he couldn't help but feel angered. He also looked back at Ding Xiaochen, and tapped a finger on the testing stone. Xiao, a flash of sword light swept out, and the testing stone suddenly surged with white light. Then, the red and purple lines appeared. High extreme of the Genesis tier, 3.5 stars aptitude. The examiner looked at the testing stone, bearing the expression of an idiot. Had this thing broken down? 3.5 stars? This had to be a joke. What? Ding Xiaochen, too, could no longer maintain his calm bearing. He immediately leaped over. He looked at the testing stone, his face slightly green. He had actually been surpassed by another. A 3.5 stars prodigy had actually appeared here. Hiss, the last time a 3.5 stars prodigy appeared, it was still 3 years ago, when Mao Dai showed his outstanding talent, and before that, it was the strongest prodigy of the Ding clan, Ding Yaolong. Such prodigies were all capable of becoming 4th severance consummate level in the end, without exception. One era was 100 million years. There were really too many people with long lives in the celestial realm. The usual way of recording by years was too inconvenient, and additionally, one epoch would be 12 trillion years. There were not many elites that could live that long, though, because there was still the immortals' tribulation. If one could not continue becoming stronger, there would ultimately come a day when even celestial kings would die. Once one had advanced into the severing mundane tier, one could gain an unlimited lifespan, but why was it that most elites had all ultimately died at the first severance because of their immortals' tribulation through these countless eras? It was too hard to break through. Everyone said that there were 9 levels for celestial king tier, and reaching each level was as difficult as ascending the heavens, but how was it not the same for the severing mundane tier and ascending origin tier? The severing mundane tier meant striking oneself with the heavens will saber. If one was the slightest bit careless, what would be severed would not be one's mortal bonds, but his fruits of cultivation. Chapter 1674, Selection. Chapter 1674, Selection. Ordinarily, 1-star aptitude would have hope of becoming a 1st severance Grand Elder, 2-star aptitude would become 2nd severance, and 3.5 stars would be qualified to aim for 4th severance. Of course, all of this was theory. However, there was one fact that could be confirmed. 3.5 stars aptitude might not be able to become 4th severance, but those that could become 4th severance would need to have at least 3.5 stars aptitude. Gasp! Ding Xiaochen looked at Ling Han jealously. This was too inconceivable. A lowly commoner actually had 3.5 stars aptitude. Even he would only be able to become a 3rd severance Grand Elder at most. Though aptitude was not unchangeable, if one had cultivated a different cultivation technique or consumed some super celestial medicine, it was completely possible that aptitude could be increased or decreased, but how could it possibly be changed without a unique opportunity? If he had known that Ling Han and the Empress had only taken the test very casually, and their true potential surpassed 3.5 stars, just what kind of expression would he have on his face? Past, Your serial number is 5574. The examiner stood up again and handed the plaque to Ling Han. Perhaps Ling Han would be another Marrow die after many years and become a new legend. What is your name, and where do you come from? Marrow Shuyu's eyes shone as she looked Ling Han up and down. Ling Han smiled slightly and replied, My name is Ling Han. I have just entered into Dark Moon City. Previously, I have been residing in a mountain forest, right until a beast stampede exploded not too long ago. Many of the residents of our village either died or moved elsewhere, so we came to Dark Moon City to seek refuge. This was the explanation that he, the Empress, the Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire, and the large black dog had agreed upon. Ling Han. Ding Xiaochen also walked over. He looked down proudly on Ling Han. I will give you a wonderful opportunity to become my follower. Didn't think that this is an insult to you. In truth, who knows how many prodigies and elites want to become my followers, but were not given this chance at all. He naturally was not planning to support Ling Han, but simply wanted to have this super genius by his side so he could simply think of a method to get him killed in future. The top prodigy of Dark Moon City. It was enough for him alone to bear such a title. There was no need for another to share the title for him. What more surpass him? I am not interested. Ling Han naturally refused. Ding Xiaochen's expression darkened, and he threatened, Brat, don't be ungrateful. Ho ho. Ling Han was too lazy to even respond to him this time, and only laughed. Ignore him. Marrow Shuyu scoffed, and said, Ding Xiaochen, let me warn you not to mess around. I plan to introduce this person to Father, and see if he has any interest in taking a disciple. If you have any ideas that you shouldn't have, then even if you are a member of the Ding clan, Father will still dare to behead you. Ding Xiaochen's fingers involuntarily moved slightly. This was a sign that he was extremely furious. He stared at Ling Han for a while, a cold smirk appearing on his lips. He was merely in the high extreme, so even if he had 3.5 stars aptitude, so what? He had the advantage of more than a whole minor level. Wouldn't that be enough to compensate for that gap of half a star of aptitude? It was inevitable for the glint of cold steel to emerge in the subsequent selection. So what if he beat him to death then? Rules would be rules. He did not speak further, but the killing intent in his eyes could not be any more obvious. Ling Han was displeased internally, and thought that it would be great if he could also borrow the name of the Rock Palace. He could simply kill a hateful guy like this, and would not have to worry about retaliation from the force behind him. However, he had promised Hu Yu that he would raze the Ding clan to the ground. At first, he was not the type to bring disaster to others. No matter how notorious a clan was, there would still be a few good people and innocents among its members. Yet now, his attitude became firm. Whether your Ding clan had any good people or not, he was determined to destroy it. Those who have received a place may advance and begin the next selection. A middle-aged man dressed in military attire appeared. He was a peak stage Saint King, and could be called a supreme elite in the ancient realm, yet was only an ordinary military officer here. And this was still because Dark Moon City was a 1-star city. If this was a 2-star or 3-star city, he might only be able to become a foot soldier of the lowest rank. More than 5,000 people walked forwards, and arrived at the foot of the mountains. The military officer took one step forwards, and said, To those who have passed through the selection today, I will be your military instructor for the next 100 years. I do not care who you are. Now that you are here, and have fallen under my supervision, you all are just soldiers, understand? Understood. More than 5,000 people all shouted loudly. Additionally, my name is Tu Kang. You all may address me as instructor too, the military officer continued. And now, let me announce the rules of the selection. Setting out from here, you will have to climb 9 mountains. There are many blood shadow wolves there, and their strength ranges from the Eternal River tier to Genesis tier. What you all have to do is to bring the tail of a single blood shadow wolf back. He paused, and then repeated, Only the first 1,000 people that bring back the tail of a blood shadow wolf will be qualified to become reserve troops of the Dark Moon Army. As for the others, I do not care what the reason is, all of you will be eliminated. In this period of time, all of you are responsible for your own lives. If you fear death, you can scram now. Actually, Everyone knew these rules already. For some, this was not their first time undergoing this test, but there were some first-timers who were starting to hesitate. At first, they had thought that they could be fearless, but now that they had reached this step, they were still afraid. Over 300 people chose to give up, but those remaining still exceeded 5,000, so the elimination rate was going to be very high. Then, set out. Kang snapped his fingers, and then sat down. Boom, more than 5,000 people immediately charged out. Strength was not the only factor in the selection, there was also the factor of luck. For example, though Eternal River Tears could not possibly be a match for Genesis Tears, if they were lucky and encountered an Eternal River Tearblood Shadow Wolf, they would still have a chance of becoming one of the first 1,000 people. Follow me. Maro Shuyu was very trustworthy, and beckoned Ling Han and the Empress over. Ling Han and the Empress didn't mind, and followed her. The three of them used their respective movement techniques, and traversed through the mountain forests. In the ancient realm, the speed of saints was about the same aside from those Genesis Tears that focused on cultivating regulations of time, who could have an advantage in speed. However, in the celestial realm, the speed of Genesis Tears varied. That was because the regulations of the celestial realm were more complete, and the structure of the heaven and earth here was incredibly sturdy. If one wanted to possess high speed, he would have to overcome various obstacles, and this led to the speed of Genesis Tears varying. Saint Kings were definitely faster than Great Saints, and Great Saints were definitely faster than Medium Saints. Of course, this did not apply to two such freaks like Ling Han and the Empress. Maro Shuyu did not know this fact, so she took the initiative to slow down. She was worried that if she went full speed ahead, Ling Han and the Empress would lose track of her. However, this kind of speed was already fast enough. After all, there were only over 300 Saint Kings that participated this time round. In the selection round, 1,000 candidates was enough. Those who performed better would just have to stand up earlier in the battle for the position of team captain, and this did not matter at all to her. With enough strength, what did she have to fear? Ding Xiaochen, meanwhile, followed behind them, looking like an eagle that was hunting its prey. Once Maro Shuyu had the slightest moment of carelessness, he would release a swift strike and deal with Ling Han. If Maro Shuyu had not been present, Ling Han actually would have been very happy to lead Ding Xiaochen to a remote place and deal with this bastard, but he could not kill Maro Shuyu too to keep her from leaking the secret, right? He gave Ding Xiaochen the middle finger, and mouthed a curse word at him. Having been around the large black dog and the others for so long, if Ling Han was determined to anger someone, he really had a lot of methods at his disposal. Holy fuck. Ding Xiaochen's face involuntarily darkened. He swore that if Ling Han were to fall into his hands, he would definitely make his death an agonizing one. Chapter 1675, Revered by the Wolf Pack. Chapter 1675, Revered by the Wolf Pack. More than 5,000 people diving into the mountain forest was akin to pouring a bucket of water into the ocean, completely negligible. What more when every single person still had to keep their guard up around others, so they naturally wanted nothing more than for other people to be as far away from them as possible. Soon, Ding Xiaochen was the only person left behind Ling Han and his group, but after a while, this guy also disappeared without a trace. Clearly, he had definitely not given up, but was rather lying in ambush secretly, wanting to grasp an opening for a sneak attack. Ling Han grinned, and asked, "Can we run faster?" Maro Shuyu was surprised. In her eyes, this was already the maximum speed a great saint could reach. She had even wanted to ask Ling Han and her companion if they should go slower. After all, even great saints could not possibly maintain this kind of maximum speed constantly. Yet Ling Han actually asked her if they could go faster. Was he being boastful? Maro Shuyu was not a gentle princess. Her personality was a fiery one. She did not say a word, but her speed increased slightly. After a while of running, she turned around, wanting to see where Ling Han and his companion had fallen behind, but she got a shock when she turned her head because Ling Han and the Empress were both closely following behind her, only about 9 meters away. This. Maro Shuyu was really shocked. Though she knew that these two had extraordinary aptitude, one having 2.5 stars, and the other having 3.5, there was still a gap of more than a whole minor level. How could these two possibly manage to follow her? Are you both monsters? She was dissatisfied, and slowly increased her speed further, but she astonishingly discovered that Ling Han and the Empress were both following her with ease, still maintaining the gap of 9 meters, which did not increase or decrease. Where are your limits? Maro Shuyu finally gave her full effort, and increased her speed to the maximum. Suddenly, it was as if she had turned into a gale. However, she soon discovered that she was still unable to throw Ling Han and the Empress off her tail. No, she was even unable to force the two of them to show the maximum level of their speed, because the two of them were still maintaining a distance of 9 meters from her, but who could really say that this was their fastest speed? Actually, Maro Shuyu could still increase her speed slightly, but that was with a secret technique, and she could only use it for a temporary burst of speed, which would be meaningless. Xiao, the three of them sped quickly. Behind them, Ding Xiaochen was running madly, but the distance between him and Ling Han's group was gradually widening, and he had finally completely lost track of all three of them. Even in Dark Moon City, it was not peaceful everywhere. There were some demonic beasts that had violent nature here. They clearly had gained intelligence, yet still had a fondness for devouring cultivators. Thus, they naturally were excluded from the cultivation civilization, and were on the opposing side of cultivators. These violent and bloodthirsty demonic beasts lived in such tall mountains, and were not completely exterminated, because they could be used to test cultivators, such as presently. Occasionally, birds would be scared into flight out of the forest, and cries would ring out. Sometimes it would be a cultivator being killed, and sometimes it would be the demonic beast that would have the tables turned on it, being killed instead. For enemies to meet on a narrow path, it was naturally the stronger side who would emerge victorious. Though they only had to run over 9 mountains, the terrain inside the mountain forest was complex, and it was very unsuitable for full-speed running. Hence, they spent a whole day's time to finally arrive at the 9th mountain. And there were blood shadow wolves here. Be careful. Blood shadow wolves are demonic beasts that live in packs. Ordinarily, a pack of blood shadow wolves would have a single wolf king, 4 to 10 guards, as well as a few dozen to over 100 common wolves. The wolf king and guard wolves would definitely be at the peak of the consummate level of the Genesis tier, and the wolf king would be an astonishing big shot, and can be claimed to be a big shot among Genesis tiers, Maro Shuyu explained to Ling Han and the Empress. Ling Han and the Empress nodded their heads. Though they did not take these wolves seriously, they did not mind listening to her explanation. Anyways, we can complete our mission as long as we have the tail of a blood shadow wolf. There is no need for us to charge into a wolf's den, we only have to find one that is all alone, Maro Shuyu continued. Fine then. Ling Han nodded with a smile. However, their luck was very bad. Though they soon discovered a wolf's den, there were as many as 100 members in this wolf pack, with no less than 30 at the consummate level of the Genesis tier, and the Wolf King was even more frightening. Ling Han was absolutely sure that even the Blue Feather Saint King and Ouyang Taishan could not possibly be a match for this Wolf King. Firstly, it was because of the regulations, and secondly, this Wolf King indeed had very strong battle prowess, suppressing all other demon wolves. We'll wait here, and there would definitely be a blood shadow wolf that falls behind the pack. Even someone with a personality like Maro Shuyu's did not dare carelessly provoke these blood shadow wolves. Ling Han's eyes swept over, and his eyes involuntarily lit up as he exclaimed, "Wife, look." He pointed at the wolves' den. They called it a wolves' den, and it was actually very simple. A large boulder protruded, forming a sheltered space. The Wolf King crouched high above on the massive boulder, its fur crimson, and appeared to be incredibly majestic. Behind it, there were 8 similarly fierce-looking giant wolves that were sitting like it was, and the other blood shadow wolves were under the large boulder. Some were sprawled out asleep, and some were playing with each other. In the deepest part underneath the large boulder, there was a plant that was thriving with growth, and they could smell its refreshing fragrance even from this distance of about a mile away. Saintly medicine. The Empress's eyes lit up. Ling Han nodded, and said, "It should be a great saint-tier medicine, Buddha heart fungus. The two of you should not be reckless," Maro Shuyu hurriedly advised them. "A saintly medicine may be good, but one should act according to one's means. If we became targeted by these blood shadow wolves, we would only be able to flee. It would not be difficult to stay alive, but if they were to be pursued by the wolf pack, how were they supposed to pass through the selection? She had just finished her words when she saw the Empress had already stood up, and was walking towards the wolf pack. Maro Shuyu paled in shock, and hurriedly planned to stop the Empress, but she was instead stopped by Ling Han. "It's fine, just let her go," Ling Han said. Maro Shuyu immediately glared angrily at Ling Han. "How could you be so heartless? That woman is clearly your wife, but you would actually watch helplessly as she jumps into danger just for the sake of a saintly medicine? You are practically scum." Flames of fury blazed in her heart, and she secretly decided to keep her distance from Ling Han in future. Merely the sight of this kind of scum made her feel disgusted. But she was completely dumbfounded with shock and stupefied when she saw the subsequent scene. The Empress had already arrived, but not only did the wolf pack not attack her, they all crouched down instead, as if they were expressing their reverence towards the Empress. Maro Shuyu rubbed her eyes, but the scene in front of her did not change in the slightest. Why? Her heart was filled with confusion, watching dumbly as the Empress plucked the saintly medicine and severed the tails of 3 blood shadow wolves. Though those 3 blood shadow wolves cried out in pain, they did not become hostile, but rather lowered their posture even further. The Empress turned around, taking dainty steps, her bearing graceful. Even Maro Shuyu could not help but feel her heart throb wildly despite the fact that she was a woman herself. However, Ling Han was very clear. Both he and the Empress had formed 10 million stars before they had broken through to the Genesis tier, and their battle prowess overwhelmed all other Genesis tiers. This was something that could not be sensed by fellow cultivators, but was discovered by the blood shadow wolves that only knew bloodshed and slaughter. They were bloodthirsty, and they also revered power. The Empress was a king among kings, and even the Wolf King was as docile as a dog. On the other hand, even if a severing mundane tier elite had come, these blood shadow wolves would still battle to the death. Because what they revered was a true king tier. Chapter 1676, Competing for Position of Captain. Chapter 1676, Competing for Position of Captain. Prodigy, king tier, these 2 terms were frequently misused. If anyone's performance was the slightest bit outstanding, he would be crowned with the title of prodigy, and if he was the slightest bit more prodigious, he would be a top prodigy, a super genius. In truth, there was only one kind of person that could be termed a king tier. The grading criteria for the severing mundane tier, immortal palace tier, and the like was still unclear, but at least below celestial level, only those who had cultivated to the true pinnacle of the eternal river tier were worthy of the title of king tier. There were really too few of such king tiers, and even in top sects, only the saints could reach such a level, and in the case of other forces, they would only be able to obtain one such prodigy in a rare stroke of great fortune. The Empress walked back, and showed Ling Han a bright smile as she handed the saintly medicine over to him. This could be grown in the Black Tower, and then dug out when they had need of it. Now that the 6th floor of the Black Tower was open, the acceleration of growth of plants had not increased, yet it could stimulate all living organisms to grow even vigorously, and increase their medicinal effects. The Empress then gave Ling Han and Maro Shuyu each a wolf's tail, and then walked forwards, holding hands with Ling Han. The saintly medicine had been collected, and they had also obtained the wolves' tails, so they were naturally leaving. Maro Shuyu's expression was completely wooden as she took the wolf's tail. She had not come back to her senses yet at all, and the same words streaked through her mind repeatedly. How could this be? In any case, it is still early, so why don't we get some more saintly medicine? Ling Han's eyes shone. The Empress nodded. As long as it was Ling Han's suggestion, she would definitely not object. Maro Shuyu followed behind them, looking like a dead fish. They swept through the area, collecting a total of 6 saintly medicines, and only now did Maro Shuyu, who had barely returned to her senses, advise them that it was time to return. Otherwise, they would definitely be ranked outside the first 1,000. Ling Han was unsatisfied, but they should still be able to come here again in future, so there was no need to rush. They returned, and though they encountered the sneak attacks of a few blind demonic beasts on their way, they were all easily dealt with by Maro Shuyu. A day later, they returned to the gathering area, and looking at the number that had already returned, they would probably be ranked in the 600s to 700s. It was good enough to have passed. After another half-day's time, the first 1,000 people appeared, and the selection ended. Tu Kang brought the 1,000 people with him, and they arrived at an army camp at the foot of the mountains. This was the place where they would stay for the next 100 years. They had not even entered the camp when they could feel a powerful aura ripple out. It had surpassed the level of Genesis tier, as if it was the aura of a supreme ruler. Severing mundane tier. There was a vice commander in the Dark Moon Army that had been temporarily transferred over to oversee them for 100 years. And in the Dark Moon Army, there were a total of 6 such vice commanders who would take turns to act as the overseer. Otherwise, if they encountered some troublemakers, a consummate level Genesis tier might not be able to deal with them. With a Severing mundane tier overseer, it would be fine. What Genesis tier would dare provoke such an elite? Tu Kang was naturally not the only military instructor here, and there were a total of 10 of them. Usually, they would be taking turns to guide the candidates on how to cooperate and work together. Those who fought alone were called cultivators, and only those who could carry out coordinated movements would be termed soldiers. 10 military instructors appeared at the same time, and that vice commander was seated high up on the platform. It was as if he had harmonized with the heaven and earth. They could clearly see where he was, but everyone would feel an uncomfortable feeling as if they could not attack him at all. This was a Severing mundane tier ancestor. And now, we will choose 10 captains from among you, and going by the results of the selection, the following 10 people step out: number 170, number 534, number 895. Tu Kang began the next stage after asking for instructions from that Severing mundane ancestor. The 10 people who had been pointed out stepped out, and unsurprisingly, Ding Xiaochen was also among them. When he walked out, he also bowed slightly to that Severing mundane ancestor seated on the high platform, and the latter actually responded. He opened his eyes, and replied with a nod. When this Grand Elder opened his eyes, it was as if the universe had collapsed. Everyone could see innumerable great stars fall down from the skies, a scene of utter destruction and annihilation, but after a shiver, they discovered that nothing strange had happened at all. This was the regulations that the Severing mundane ancestor had cultivated, which were inclined towards destruction and bloodshed. The moment he opened his eyes, he could affect the masses, and for those whose wills were weaker, it was very possible that this effect would last throughout his whole life, and they would not be able to escape from under this influence forever. Cultivating Tao was naturally the Tao of heaven and earth, and if you were strapped in the Tao of another, how could you possibly be successful? That is Ding Hu, Lord Ding Hu, a First Severance Grand Elder, the Vice Commander of the White Tiger Army. Some people immediately whispered among themselves, and very soon, those who had initially been unaware of the identity of that Severing mundane ancestor all found out. There was a great commander in the Dark Moon Army, and that was Maro Dai, a Third Severance Grand Elder. Underneath the great commander, there were 3 commanders, who led 3 different armies, and they were the Azure Dragon Army, White Tiger Army, and the Vermilion Bird Army, respectively. Why were there 3 armies, and not 2, or 4, or 5? That was because there were 3 great forces in Dark Moon City. The Duan clan controlled the Azure Dragon Army, the Ding clan controlled the White Tiger Army, and the Long clan controlled the Vermilion Bird Army. From a certain aspect, the great commander Maro Dai was merely a figurehead with no actual military authority. Subordinate to the commander would be the vice-commanders, and there were a total of 6, 2 for each respective army. Everyone shook their heads. With Ding Hu present, that Ding Xiaochen would be able to gain the position of captain at the very least. However, with Ding Xiaochen's strength, it was actually not a difficult feat for him to accomplish. Thus, though everyone was slightly displeased, they did not have too much resistance against the idea, either. The rules are as follows. The present 10 are defending champions, and will accept the challenges of others. If they win, they will have successfully defended their positions, and if they lose, the defending champion will become another person. The time limit is 3 days, and at the end of the 3 days, the 10 remaining defending champions will become captains. Additionally, every battle has to be decided in an hour's time. If the victor is still undecided, it will be judged as the defending champion's victory. After every battle ends, the victor has the right to request an hour's time of rest. If he does not receive a challenge in the next hour, then the defending champion will be judged as directly winning. Then, let's begin. Tu Kang's style was filled with the succinct ways of a soldier, not sluggish at all. Ding Xiaochen and the others all walked into the training grounds in the center of the army camp. The celestial realm was incredibly sturdy in the first place, and added with the fact that there was a severing mundane tier overseer, there naturally was no need to worry that the fierce battles would destroy the entire army camp. The defending champions had already appeared. Those who intended to fight for the position of a captain all looked over the 10 people, wanting to find the weakest among them that they could challenge. However, because there were only 3 days, even if there really were any pushovers, they would be very quickly replaced, so there was no meaning to being in a rush to make a move, either. However, because there was still the limit of 1 hour, if there was still no challenger, the defending champion would become an assured captain, so when the hour's time was almost up, they gradually issued challenges to the 10 defending champions. As expected, luck was a big factor for entering into the top 10 during the selection. Some of them had kept their skills hidden, concealing their strength for a final explosive burst at this moment. And after a round of battles, 6 of the 10 defending champions had changed, more than half of them replaced. Ling Han looked at an elder, and said to the Empress, "This guy's strength is not too bad, and it looks like his bloodline is different from others." That elder's whole body would be covered with ink-black scales when he was in battle. This was completely a thick layer of armor, which had a very strong defensive ability, so he did not have to fear the attacks of his opponent, and faced him head-on. His opponent had thus been defeated in 10 moves through this kind of method. There is that person too. The Empress looked towards a woman. Chapter 1677, Fighting Ding Xiaochen. Chapter 1677, Fighting Ding Xiaochen. That was a woman that was completely enshrouded in a black long dress, her features old-fashioned. Though she looked to only be in her 20s, she was serious in speech and manner, as if someone owed her a large sum of money, and disliked anyone she cast her eye on. She was ruthless in her moves, controlling the rarely seen regulations of darkness. As darkness swept past, everything would be corroded, which was incredibly frightening. Ling Han had also cultivated regulations of darkness, and that was the darkness of the Paramount Knight, but it was more inclined towards a supplementary skill, completely different from her corrosive power that was filled with destruction. "And there is that youth too," Ling Han signaled. The youth he was speaking of looked to be only in his mid-teens, still bearing a childish look on his face. Occasionally, he would show a sheepish grin, but if anyone were to think that he was harmless because of that, he would be out of luck. The youth wielded a sword, which was incredibly fast and extraordinarily sharp. Previously, he had delivered a series of consecutive sword strikes and severed his opponent's weapon. The final strike had pierced the chest of his opponent, and if it were not for a light hump from Ding who that sent him backwards, his opponent would probably have become a dead corpse by now. Crafty, vicious, and merciless. These were the traits that Ling Han had labeled this youth with. He should have gone to be an assassin. Being a soldier was really too stifling for his talent. As expected, this youth had even drawn Ding Hu's attention. Though he had humphed, expressing his displeasure over how the youth had delivered a fatal strike to his companion, he could not help but cast a few more looks at this youth. This kind of talent was worthy of bringing into the Ding clan. If he was well nurtured, he would become a severing mundane tier assassin. Though battle prowess was an important criterion for judging elites, the world did not have the rule that elites would not die in the hands of someone weaker. Of course, it was an absolutely impossible feat for a Genesis tier to kill a severing mundane tier, but for a first severance to kill a second severance, or even a third severance, was not just a fantasy story, and this usually happened with assassins. No one would continuously maintain his prime battle condition at all times. There would eventually come a time of carelessness, and an excellent assassin would be able to grasp this fleeting instant and move to kill him. In Ding Hu's eyes, this youth was a treasure. Unfortunately, though he had the intention, he did not dare directly bring this youth back to the Ding clan. The 3 clans had a rule that such talents required a fair competition among the 3 of them. However, since it was he who had first discovered him, he could later have the clan move to investigate the weaknesses and habits of this youth so that they could take appropriate steps. 90 years later, those that had not yet been eliminated would officially join the Dark Moon Army, and these 90 years would be the time for the three great clans to use their various methods. Some would promise great profits, some would simply take him into the clan as a son-in-law and begin a competition among themselves for important talents. Of course, there was no single person that could simultaneously gain the interest of all three clans most of the time. There were really too few prodigies. Maro Dai, for example, had gained the admiration of who knew how many prized daughters of the three clans, yet surprisingly did not choose any one of them. However, he was also out of the control of the three great clans because of this, and maintained an absolutely independent stand. Now, he was also above worldly matters, and the three great clans were all competing to attract his interest. The tournament battles continued. The Empress expressed that she would not compete for the position of captain. She was going to stay with Ling Han. One of the two of them definitely had to be a soldier. Otherwise, if they were in different teams, they would be in a competitive relationship. Elites moved respectively. Only the strong would be respected in the army. If you had defeated your opponent when he was completely exhausted, then even if you became a captain, who among your subordinates would truly respect you? Maro Shuyu had also joined the battle. She was at the consummate level of the Genesis tier, and also had 3 stars aptitude, so her battle prowess was extremely strong. She easily obtained the position of defending champion. I'll go then. Ling Han released the Empress's hand reluctantly. The Empress nodded gently, her eyes enchanting. Ling Han leaped and arrived in front of a person. It was Ding Xiaochen. Seeing that Ling Han had actually gone to challenge Ding Xiaochen, a considerable number of people exclaimed in shock. Previously, those who had challenged Ding Xiaochen had all been defeated terribly, and now it was almost an hour's time since the last person had challenged him. It looked like he was just about to become the first person that would not need 3 days' time to become captain, yet Ling Han had thrown a wrench into his plans. This time, Ding Xiaochen would at least have to wait for another hour. Why had he challenged Ding Xiaochen? Was he trying to make things difficult for him? Ding Xiaochen was also slightly surprised, but then he showed a menacing expression. Previously, he had not managed to get a chance. He had not thought that Ling Han would actually deliver himself right into his hands. He really was courting death. If it had been the other vice-commanders from the other clans, Ding Xiaochen would be stopped even if he wanted to deliver a fatal strike, but would Ding Hu stop him? You're dead. Ding Xiaochen smirked coldly. I have to say, you are incomparably stupid. Your mouth stinks. Have you forgotten to rinse your mouth when you woke up? Ling Han said slowly. If it was a verbal battle, he really feared no one. The more stubborn your mouth is now, the worse your suffering will be later. Ding Xiaochen's lips slowly curled. Faced with a man that was about to die, his self-restraint was still quite good, and he did not lose composure just because he was egged on. Ho ho! Ling Han laughed, expressing all his disdain in this derisive laugh. Even if Ding Xiaochen was trained in restraint, he easily exploded in fury because of this condescending laugh. His expression was filled with rage, and he forced himself to take a few deep breaths, telling himself that there was no need to drop down to the level of this brat, and he just had to kill him. You are asking for your own suffering. He moved, and pressed out a palm. Boom, origin power solidified into a giant hand, a black sun shining on every fingertip, which looked incredibly bizarre. Ling Han puffed up his cheeks and blew. With an exhalation, those 5 suns were all extinguished, and this giant hand also turned back into origin power which then dissipated. Everyone was shocked, as if they had just discovered Ling Han's presence, and surveyed him continuously. Was this really a cultivator in the high extreme of the Genesis tier? He had not even reached the peak stage yet. At most, he could only be in the late stage. 3.5 stars aptitude was really so frightening. Even Ding Hu couldn't help but open his eyes as he surveyed Ling Han. Actually, with his strength, it was the same whether he opened his eyes or not. Wherever his divine sense could reach, he could see. But because this scene was too shocking, he was emotionally stirred, and opened his eyes once more. Ding Xiaochen also looked at Ling Han in shock. He did not dare believe that his move had been so simply and easily resolved. Was this 3.5 stars aptitude? Allowing him to oppose him even with the gap of a minor level between them? Fuck, was it that exaggerating? He took a deep breath, and told himself not to be affected. He had yet to use any secret technique. If he used it, how easy would it be to suppress a high extreme Genesis tier? You've got some skill, but in front of me, putting aside the fact that you are only in the high extreme, even if you were in the consummate level, you would still be suppress. Pa. Just when Ding Xiaochen had finished his words, he received a harsh slap. It naturally was delivered by Ling Han. This was definitely deliberate. He had waited until Ding Xiaochen finished speaking to slap him. This face slap was really painful and loud. Ding Xiaochen roared out angrily. His hair fluttered, his eyes becoming completely white like blazing lightning. This time, he was really and truly in a thunderous rage. Having his face slapped in public like this, how could he endure any more? Die, he shouted loudly, his whole person being engulfed in the power of time, and charged towards Ling Han. He was going to crush this damn guy. Chapter 1678, Collapse at the First Blow. Chapter 1678, Collapse at the First Blow. Ding Xiaochen charged over, wrapped in the power of time. He looked as if no attack could touch him. Ling Han gave a casual flick of his finger. Pu, sword light slashed onto Ding Xiaochen's body, yet was easily swallowed by the power of time, and he was completely unaffected. No wonder the Ding clan had deliberately targeted the Hu clan, and snatched away the secret technique of the Hu clan. This celestial technique was indeed powerful. When the power of time spread out, they could practically ignore the gap in battle prowess, allowing the user to become invincible. However, Ling Han, too, had a considerable number of celestial techniques in his grasp. Ha had even learnt the Tide of the Ages as well, and had more so obtained the complete secret technique from Hu Yu. In terms of the grasp of this type of celestial technique, Ling Han was not inferior to the Ding clan at all. The difference lay in the fact that his present cultivation level was still too low, so he was unable to completely execute the might of this celestial technique to the fullest. Ha ha, in front of the ultimate technique of our Ding clan, what can you do? Ding Xiaochen's confidence returned, and he called out arrogantly. Though killing Ling Han could not possibly make up for the humiliation that he had suffered, if he allowed Ling Han to stay alive, he would probably be unable to raise his head ever again in this lifetime. Ling Han smiled slightly, and flicked another finger. Xiao, another flash of sword light streaked past, but this time it forcibly penetrated the power of time covering Ding Xiaochen. Still, because its might had been weakened slightly, it only managed to tear open this layer of power of time before vanishing. But it was this one move that terrified Ding Xiaochen to the extreme. He hurriedly stopped, his expression revealing his extreme shock. The other party had actually broken through his power of time. Though he had not managed to wound him, if he had continued with another strike, he would have been in deep trouble. Impossible. When he used the Tide of the Ages, it should have aged any kind of attack. It should be known that he was a peak stage Saint King, and his cultivation level was already highest in this tier. If anyone wanted to suppress him in terms of regulations, that could only be accomplished by a severing mundane ancestor. How did Ling Han manage to do it? Not only was he stunned, Ding Hu also revealed a hint of surprise. He had a kind of feeling that Ling Han perhaps had not exerted his full effort yet. Without using his full efforts, he was already able to defeat a young prodigy of the Ding clan. And while he himself was only in the high extreme of the Genesis tier at that. Hiss, just what kind of freak was this? Ding Hu was slightly hesitant. Ordinarily, the Ding clan should try as much as possible to gain this kind of prodigy with 3.5 stars aptitude, but looking at the present situation, it seemed like this boy had a very large conflict with Ding Xiaochen. Then going by first impressions, this boy definitely did not have a favorable impression of the Ding clan. In future, even if they offered the same conditions to attract him, the possibility that Ling Han would lean towards the Long clan and the Duan clan was much greater. Since that was the case, A killing intent suddenly surged up in Ding Hu's heart. Marrow Dai was a previous example. They allowed him to freely mature, and the result? He had now become a force that could become a threat to the three great clans by himself. Thankfully, he only had a daughter. If the Marrow clan had also prospered, then it was possible that a fourth great force would appear in the Dark Moon City. The cake was only so big, and who would be willing to have others take a share of their own profits? The best scenario was for Ding Xiaochen to show his might and kill this brat. In any case, wasn't an accidentally fatal move a very common thing to happen in the tournament battles? After a moment of shock, Ding Xiaochen finally pulled himself together. He drew out a saber. The saber was dark green in color, and seemed to have been made from wood, but a frightening murderous aura immediately surged out the moment he drew this weapon. This murderous aura took the form of a giant tree, and what was shocking was the fact that the great tree was brandishing its vine-like branches, dancing around as if they were whips. Jade blood man-eating tree. Around them, many people exclaimed in shock, their faces green. This was a demonic tree that was fond of hunting humans and demonic beasts. When it was immobile, it was like any ordinary tree, but if anyone arrived at the base of the tree, the demonic tree would attack at the most unexpected moment, and wrap its vines around its prey. Furthermore, there were sharp spikes which could excrete poison and numb its target in an instant on its vines. Using the trunk of this tree as the main body, and sealing the spirit of the demonic tree within, the precious tool that was refined would also possess most of the might of the demonic tree. This was an extremely frightening god tool. The tournament battles did not forbid the use of weapons, because what the Dark Moon army needed were soldiers that could kill others, and not cultivators that would be sparring and competing with others. Ding Xiaochen was instantly brimming with confidence now that he had his saber in hand. The saber's blade shone with green light, and even his face turned green from the glow. Previously, he had not encountered anyone that could match him yet, so he naturally had not even bothered to use the god tool, but now he was forced into it by Ling Han. He did not rush to attack. There was presently a green murderous aura surging out of the blade, spreading in all directions. This was the spirit of the jade blood man-eating tree. Because the process of refining it was extremely frightening, the spirit of the demonic tree was also filled with fury, and its killing intent was astonishing. Because he was the wielder, he was completely immune to this kind of murderous aura, but the others would be affected. Though the jade blood man-eating tree was a plant-type demonic breed, aside from the fact that it cultivated the wood element regulations by nature, it also had poison element regulations. This was its unique trait. Regulations had no form, and were fused within its spirit, so there was a strong poison mingled inside this murderous aura. Go die. Ding Xiaochen glared coldly at Ling Han, and declared, when the spirit-severing saber appears, no one will stay alive. Ling Han laughed loudly. It is really too sad not to become a comedian with your talent. Listen to a piece of advice from me. From tomorrow onwards, it would be better for you to go to restaurants and inns in the city to have your own show. Stubborn. Ding Xiaochen used his origin power so that the might of the divine saber in his hands could be released even faster. Ling Han shook his head and said, "At first, I wanted to see how much strength you actually had. I never thought that the basis of your confidence is a mere saber. I can't even be bothered to watch you continue your performance." His figure flashed, and he charged towards Ding Xiaochen. Lightning flash was used, and his speed was incredibly and extraordinarily fast. Even if he had not used it to its fullest, it was no longer something that Ding Xiaochen could catch up with, just like how he had received a slap from Ling Han, and still had not realized how he had been slapped even at this moment. When Ling Han's fist was about to punch Ding Xiaochen's face, only then did he become alert, but it was already too late for him to brandish his saber in a slash against Ling Han at this time. He could only produce a burst of speed, and retreat backwards quickly. But could this be a match for Ling Han's speed? Peng! Ding Xiaochen's face instantly received a solid punch, and he couldn't help but stumble backwards. However, he had not steadied his footing yet when Ling Han's second punch had already fallen. Peng! 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 In just that short instant, he had already been hit with over a dozen punches. Collapsing at the first blow, Ling Han stated calmly, and as if providing evidence for his judgment, Ding Xiaoquan's figure was sent flying before landing heavily on the ground. All around them, there was a dead silence. Even the other battles had all stopped, and everyone's attention was drawn here. Ding Xiaoquan had really collapsed at the first blow. From the start to finish, Ling Han had only flicked his fingers and waved his fists around. He had not used any powerful technique at all, but what about Ding Xiaoquan? He had used celestial techniques and a god tool, but he did not even manage to hold up to a single strike from Ling Han. Was this the gap between 3 stars and 3.5 stars of aptitude? Everyone was in disbelief. Perhaps if the two of them had the same cultivation level, this kind of difference was still possible, but Ding Xiaoquan clearly had the advantage of a minor level, so how could such a situation possibly happen? Ding Xiaoquan struggled to his feet, and peng, he was sent back to the ground with another blow from Ling Han. On the tournament stage, as long as one party had not collapsed or admitted defeat, the battle would continue. Ding Xiaoquan was unwilling to admit defeat. He had already lost all his pride from being beaten by Ling Han, and if he was to admit defeat in public, then he would really be unable to hold his head high ever again. Chapter 1679, Completely Shameless. Chapter 1679, Completely Shameless. But what was the point of forcefully enduring like this? Peng, peng, peng. Ding Xiaoquan was continuously sent to the ground, his face already swollen horribly, and Ling Han was also very measured in his blows. He did not put too much strength so that Ding Xiaoquan would pass out, but rather allowed him to maintain a completely conscious state. Would he admit defeat? Ding Xiaoquan gritted his teeth. This was his final bottom line, he would definitely not speak up and admit defeat. Initially, Ling Han planned to continue playing around like this, but when he saw that there was not enough time left, he shot out a kick, and sent Ding Xiaoquan out of the battle area. According to the rules, this naturally was judged as a loss. Humph! Ding, who was extremely displeased, and suddenly opened his eyes, glaring at Ling Han. Ling Han couldn't help but take a step back, his face suddenly turning pale. He had been struck by Ding Hu. This strike had no form or shape, and was only a humph, yet contained Ding Hu's martial intent. Just how powerful was a severing mundane ancestor? If they had been in the ancient realm, then a mere thought would be enough to shatter a great star. And now, this kind of psychic blade had struck Ling Han, so how could it possibly be a pleasant feeling? Fortunately, Ding Hu did not dare commit murder in public, so he could only use limited power, and Ling Han's physique was astonishingly strong, so this psychic blade actually only caused minor injuries to Ling Han. Ding Hu's expression involuntarily turned slightly ugly. His initial intention had been to cause a severe injury to Ling Han. This kind of result caused him both displeasure and shock. This young man's physique was too shocking. He only suffered minor injuries even after taking a psychic blade from him. With his identity, if his first attack had missed, he should not have been so shameless to make another move, but Ding Hu did not have that kind of magnanimous bearing, and couldn't help but throw out another psychic blade. Pu. Ling Han's chest instantly split open, and blood gushed out. Even his half-star divine metal-level physique could not block such a blow. The severing mundane tear was too strong. Ling Han stumbled. He knew this must have been a move from Ding Hu. In this place, only this severing mundane tear could have posed a threat to him. He only felt an agony in his chest like a flame burning. Ding Hu was really too despicable. Not only did he wound him with a psychic blade, he also inserted a sliver of his own martial intent into the blade. His purpose was to torment him for a few decades. This was a warning. To dare wound a member of his Ding clan, this would be the punishment. Of course, if Ling Han encountered other severing mundane tier elites, he could ask the latter to help him dissipate this martial intent, but the question here was, how many people would be willing to offend the Ding clan for the sake of a nameless nobody? Every elite had their unique martial intent, and there were only 30+ severing mundane tiers in Dark Moon City, so they were all familiar with each other. Ling Han steadied his footing, and looked towards Ding Hu, his eyes burning with blazing fighting spirit as well as a kind of powerful disdain. Your Ding clan only knows how to bully others with your superior might. A so-called severing mundane ancestor actually made a move on a junior twice, and was actually shamed into anger just because he had missed, How utterly shameless. On the other side, the Empress was also bursting with killing intent. Not one person actually dared to stand within 30 meters of her. They had all stepped back, or their hearts would have burst. However, the Empress did not move rashly. It was true that she was proud, but if she had been a rash fool, how could she have possibly sat on the throne of the chaotic star's majestic empire for 1,000,000 years? She would have long since been taken into someone else's harem as a prized possession. And now, she had to bear it. The Empress clenched her hands into fists, her beautiful eyes flickering with the flames of rage. If looks could kill, then Ding Hu would have already died a few thousand times over. A dead silence fell. Anyone could guess that this had been a move from Ding Hu, but who would dare to rebuke a severing mundane ancestor? Even Maro Shuyu was hesitant. Her father had strictly told her to conduct herself virtuously, and not to have any kind of involvement with the three great clans. Ding Hu calmly said, "In the previous battle, 3590 has been sent out of the grounds by 5574, but 5574 has also been seriously wounded by 3590, and this battle would barely be considered a victory for 5574. 3590 was Ding Xiaoquan's serial number, and 5574 was Ling Han's. Going by Ding Hu's explanation, Ding Xiaoquan was actually more or less Ling Han's equal. Though he had been sent flying, he had also wounded Ling Han severely. Fuck, could he be any more shameless? It clearly was Ding Xiaoquan that had been terribly defeated, and you were also the one who had wounded Ling Han, yet actually shamelessly placed this merit under Ding Xiaoquan's name. Correct. Ding Hu making a move on Ling Han was bullying the weak with his superior strength, but in Ding Xiaoquan's case, that was a battle of equals. Though there was a gap of a whole minor level, it could just barely be considered just. The word merit was not used in an exaggerated manner. If it were not for the fact that Ding Xiaoquan had actually been sent flying out, Ding Xiaoquan might even distort the facts, and it was possible that he would judge this as Ling Han's loss. When Ding Hu finished his words, a commotion broke out among the 1,000 or so gathered here. They had seen some shameless people, but this was their first time that they had seen someone shameless to this extent. Humph. Ding Hu's eyes swept over them, and as a frightening intimidation surged out, it instantly suppressed everyone's displeasure. Who dared violate the authority of a severing mundane ancestor? Once again, a dead silence fell. Only then did Ding Hu nod in satisfaction, and declared, "Continue the challenges." When everyone heard this, their expressions shifted once more. What Ding Hu meant was there was no need to allow Ling Han to rest, and they could begin challenging Ling Han immediately. But Ling Han had just been severely wounded by a severing mundane ancestor, and was not even allowed the slightest bit of recovery time. How could he possibly be able to bear anyone's attacks? Even an eternal river tear would probably be able to defeat him. So ruthless, everyone exclaimed in their minds. Though Ding Xiaoquan had been defeated, and had even lost the ability to fight any longer, and thus had no hope of claiming the position of a captain, Ding Hu had no plans of allowing Ling Han to become a captain, either. Ding Hu broke into a faint smile. Merely a nameless nobody, and he thought he could oppose the Ding clan? What a joke. He had 10,000 ways that he could kill Ling Han with. After a momentary silence, the battle continued, but Ding Hu's expression was still incredibly dark because though Ling Han was proudly standing there, bleeding non-stop, no one actually moved to challenge him. These people. Ding Hu only felt that his authority had received a great provocation. He already said that they could challenge him, but there was not a single person that made a move on Ling Han. Did these people plan to rebel against him? His eyes swept over them, and everyone lowered their heads, not daring to make eye contact with him. Everyone had a bottom line, and what Ding Hu had done today had already crossed everyone's bottom line. Cultivators only respected true strength. If Ding Hu had called out anyone to challenge Ling Han, then no one would have been able to endure such pressure, and would definitely have been compelled to move. However, the law did not punish numerous offenders. Ding Hu couldn't punish all of them, right? Then, it was natural that no one would step out to challenge Ling Han. Even if they could defeat Ling Han now, they would be scorned by others in future. Who would respect such a captain? Everyone did not dare oppose a severing mundane ancestor directly, Yet they were using this kind of method to express their support for Ling Han. Ling Han's figure stood upright, unbending and unyielding. At present, my strength is inferior to yours, but if you want to suppress me, I will definitely not allow your wish to come true. Even minor characters had their own backbone. They could be defeated, but would definitely not abandon their pride. However, Ling Han's injuries were actually not as severe as Ding Hu thought. He had already channeled a drop of indestructible true fluid to control his injuries, but because of Ding Hu's martial intent, he could not completely heal them. This would require him to enter the Black Tower, and have the power of the Black Tower erase his martial intent. The present Ling Han still had 70% of his battle prowess, at least. And even this was enough to overwhelm all other Genesis tiers aside from the Empress. Very soon, an hour had passed. Normally, since Ding Hu had already said that challenges could immediately begin, then the countdown should have begun from that moment, and Ling Han would already be the first that has risen above the others, and become the first captain of this selection of reserve troops. However, Ding Hu sent a warning gaze at Tu Kang, signaling that the countdown of 1 hour was only to begin now. This man was already completely shameless, and Ling Han ignored him completely. When he had gained enough strength, he would raise the Ding clan to the ground, and by then, he would really want to see what kind of expressions would be on the faces of these bastards of the Ding clan. Chapter 1680, If the Price is High Enough. Chapter 1680, If the Price is High Enough. Ding Hu's expression was dark. As a severing mundane tier, it had already been a very long time since he had such an unpleasant experience, but now a mere Genesis tier actually caused him to bear such a powerful killing intent. He declared, "For those who can obtain the position of captain this time round, I will present a reward of 10 star stones." Star stones were a natural resource unique to the celestial realm, and were made from the shards of stars above the 9 heavens, which were also meteorites. The 9 heavens of the celestial realm could not be ascended. As legend had it, only celestial kings could ascend, so one could only wait until the shards of stars in the skies fell down as meteorites to be able to refine star stones out of them. The Tao of heaven and earth were contained within, and were of great help to the advancement of cultivation level for cultivators. Including the Dark Moon Army, every soldier of the enlisted army could obtain 2 star stones as their pay, and every member of the reserve troops would earn 1. Even a captain could only earn 2, which was the same as any soldier of the official army. And now Ding Hu promised 10 star stones. This reward could be claimed to be quite generous. Don't think that time was cheap in the celestial realm. Because competition in the celestial realm was cruel, time would only be more valuable. What was Ding Hu's purpose? Everyone was clear, he wanted to use wealth to get others to make a move on Ling Han. If I exert pressure, you all think that the law does not punish numerous offenders, and ignore me completely, but what about 10 star stones? Who could refuse? To Ding Hu, taking out 100 star stones naturally was only a small token, merely the cultivation resources for 1 month for a severing mundane tier. If the price was high enough, there would be those who were willing to be bought. Previously, no one had made any move. Firstly, even if they defeated Ling Han, they would be uncomfortable even in the position of captain. It was like there was a fire lit under their behinds. But it was a different story with a reward of 10 star stones. A lot of people were willing to give it a try. There would be one person that would be eliminated from the reserve troops every single year. What if they were eliminated in their very first year? Hence, 10 star stones were still considerably valuable. Xiao, a person shot out, and stood in front of Ling Han. It was a man whose looks were not outstanding. He clasped his hands in Ling Han's direction, and asked, "Brother, I have no wish to wound you, so could you admit defeat on your own volition?" Ling Han's eyes burned fiercely. Facing a man that planned to take advantage of his critical state, what need was there for him to be polite? "Scram," he stated calmly. "You take my kindness as ill intention?" The man smirked coldly, and suddenly shot out, charging towards Ling Han. As he saw it, with how severely wounded Ling Han was at present, he would be able to defeat him with a light blow. Thus, he even cautiously controlled his strength to avoid killing Ling Han with a single blow. Ling Han moved, and gripped that man's neck with a single move. Then, He slammed him into the ground. Peng, that man was instantly sent heavily onto the ground. He had not even managed to get up when Ling Han had already stepped on his head. "Take off your foot." The man roared in fury. This was too humiliating. He pushed with both hands against the ground, wanting to stand back up. Ling Han ignored him. He only looked at Ding Hu, who was on the high platform. Then, with a slight effort of his right foot, Peng, the man's head below his foot, was forcibly stomped into the hard rock. It should be known that the rocks here were extremely hard, and were completely capable of sustaining a powerful barrage from a Genesis tier, yet Ling Han actually stomped a man's head in with one foot. What kind of concept was that? The arms of the man below his foot immediately drooped lifelessly as he had directly passed out. Ling Han's foot was placed on that man's head, while his eyes were fixed on Ding Hu. His provocation was leaping from his action. "Come on then, what other tricks do you have? I will take all of them on." How domineering. Everyone paled in silence. This brat was really fierce to actually dare to oppose a vice commander publicly like this. Could it be that he did not know that this vice commander would be their overseer for as long as 100 years here? If you were not eliminated, then you would have to live under his shadow for the next 100 years. But even more people could feel their blood burn hot, feeling that this was what a true man was, and this was what a true cultivator should be like. The fury of even an ordinary man could spill blood in all directions. Ding Hu's little finger involuntarily moved. This was a signal that he was close to being unable to control his killing intent. But if he dared make a move to kill at this moment, he definitely would be targeted by the Long clan and Duan clan. It was not impossible that he would be punished with death, even. The relations between the three great clans definitely could not be considered amiable, especially with the Ding clan's precedent. They had caused another prestigious clan, the Hu clan, to suffer a destructive calamity, so who would not guard against them? There will be a chance, there will be many chances in future, Ding Hu told himself mentally. He closed his eyes once more, ignoring Ling Han's provocation. He actually did not know what was going on. The moment he set eyes on Ling Han, he felt dislike for him. Otherwise, how could he have so quickly forced a 3.5 stars aptitude prodigy onto the opposing sides of the Ding clan? Perhaps he had seen the hatred that Ling Han bore towards the Ding clan in his eyes. After an hour, another greedy man moved to attack Ling Han, thinking that his might was only short-lived, and that it was impossible for him to continue such a performance, but the result was still the Samehe was pressed down onto the ground by Ling Han with a single move, and had his head stomped into rock. There really was no one else that was this domineering. After this, no one else dared challenge Ling Han, he was too powerful. Before the 3 days' time had passed, the 10 captains had actually all emerged. Everyone had eyes they could see with. Those who could successively win over a dozen battles were definitely overwhelmingly strong, so it would be better for them to avoid seeking their own suffering. Next, it was the allocation of members for the 10 troops. Every person could choose to follow any of the captains, and the captain could also choose whether to take them in or otherwise. This was a two-sided decision. When everyone had made their choice, those remaining would be randomly stuffed into the troops that did not have the full 100 whether they liked it or not. Ling Han stood, his blood still flowing profusely. The martial intent of severing mundane tier was wreaking havoc in his blood and flesh, and even the indestructible Heaven's Scroll was unable to expel it. This gap in cultivation level was really too wide. He was like a lone wolf that had been injured and was bleeding, yet his fighting spirit burned even fiercer than before, and was more frightening now. The Empress naturally chose him to be her captain without hesitation, but aside from her, no one else dared come over to his side. Who dared to offend Ding Hu? Previously, it could be claimed that the law did not punish numerous offenders, but if anyone were to take the initiative to follow Ling Han now, then wasn't that a direct slap to Ding Hu's face? Who would dare slap the face of a severing mundane ancestor? Compared to the other captains, who had many visitors, Ling Han's side was deserted. An indifferent smile hung on his lips, and he was indeed uncaring. He merely wanted to make use of the Dark Moon Army to fit in with the Celestial Realm, and did not have any other thoughts aside from that. Since he had no particular ambition, he naturally feared nothing. Of course, he definitely had a clear short-term goal by now, and that was to destroy the Ding clan. The other 9 captains soon finished their recruitment, and the remaining 98 people had no other alternative, and were forcibly listed under Ling Han's banner. At this time, they had no further need to use serial numbers, and registered their own names and personal information. Ling Han found out that assassin that looked like a kid was named Wei Bo, the woman who used the corrosive power of darkness was called Qin Hanyu, and the old man covered in black scales was called Luo Xinyang. Because Ling Han's subordinates were all those remaining after the best had been chosen, their quality was naturally also the most inferior. It was inevitable that they were all sighing in despair. It looked like they would all be bullied by the others in the upcoming 100 years. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories,